it's significantly different. There's more. This situation with Mr. Peretti is going to be a little bit more complicated because for one, there's more individuals directly involved, um, and for two, it is kind of hard to see exactly what is going on in the little scuffle. There's a lot of camera angles that the Department of Justice is going to have to go through, and just as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche stated this morning, that there's still a lot to go through, and they still have a lot of camera angles to see. They haven't seen everything yet, so there is an active investigation going on, and these things will get hashed out. Uh, as far as fault, we'll find that out as soon as they conclude their investigation. I think as of right now, both sides of the fence are acting on emotion as opposed to what rationale needs to have transpire. So I think it's just wise to wait and see what comes out. Obviously, we haven't seen the body cam footage yet, if there is any, which I'm sure there is, and we'll see what they come up with.
And as far as the question of sanctuary policies are concerned, Minnesota, of course, has refused to repeal them. But do you see other states adopting similar measures amidst this brutality with which ICE agents are now really carrying on their operations?
When it comes to ICE operations, obviously ICE is responsible, and Border Patrol and Homeland Security. Those agencies are responsible for keeping the United States of America safe, and that goes from border to border. So for Minnesota to just declare, whatever they want to declare, uh, that's going to be in conflict with the United States government. We have to remember that Minnesota is its own entity. They're a state. They're supposed to fund themselves. They're supposed to, to govern themselves. However, when it comes to federal law, they do have to follow federal law. So the immigration policy is pretty clear. If you cross illegally, it is a crime. So that is something that they're going to have to, decide. Are they going to continue to go against federal law? And I think that is part of the problem with our justice system as a whole. We have watered down, we have watered down crime, and that's not how the United States was built. We were built on a checks and balances system. We were built on a solid judicial system, and it has been watered down over time. Now we're to the point where politicians can get in front of a TV camera and pick and choose what crimes they want to enforce and what crimes they don't want to enforce. But my message to them is, you are the lawmakers. If you do not like how a law is written, get together and propose a change to the law. Uh, your job is to not get in front of a TV camera and influence the United States citizens to have an upheaval to force a law to not be followed. So they're in violation of federal law. Now they can protest. Protest is a constitutionally protected event. However, we're seeing now they're busting out windows of hotels. They're trying to force their way past Minneapolis PD. So these things are escalating, and I blame this on leadership. And this can go both ways. President Trump can do more. Tom Homan can do more. But we also are seeing Tim Walz is encouraging people to violate federal law. So this is something that needs to get a handle on, and instead of biting back at each other, they need to sit down and really sit and figure this out. We're so divided as a country
Sure.
that common sense dialogue is not happening.
Eric, is there sufficient evidence to prove that Pretty had immigrated illegally, given the fact that he was an ICU nurse and possessed a legal gun?
So here's the discrepancy that I have when I watch all the videos. So yes, he's a U.S. citizen. He worked for the VA. He seemed to have a pretty stable, law-abiding life. He had a firearm that was registered. He had a concealed weapon permit. Seemed to be doing everything correct. However, to interject himself when ICE is dealing with that woman, that's what I saw was he interjected himself in a potential arrest and detain situation. So that is where he started to violate federal law. So that's when these protesters, they have to understand that when law enforcement, whether it's right or wrong, and this is where I go back and I say that our justice system is broken overall, is because the citizens are supposed to depend on the courts and whatnot to solve our issues. So if this young man, Mr. Preddy, sees that ICE is violating somebody's constitutional rights, that is an issue for federal court. That is an issue for civil suits. It's not an issue for him to interject himself in a situation that he may not fully have a grasp on. She could have had a weapon or been mentally unstable. We don't know. And for him to just interject himself, it places him in a liability situation. It places himself in a potential to be in an aggressive situation. And then on top of that, he had a firearm on him. During this scuffle, we don't know, as a law enforcement officer, we don't know if he had planned on using this firearm. We didn't know if he had the proper documentation. He just instantly interjected himself in a situation where officers were trying to potentially detain a woman. So it just depends on what spectrum you look at it. It could be something as innocent as he's just trying to help get her out of the way. He could have been trying to assist her. She was falling to the ground, and as a medical professional, he was there to help her. So we don't know the specifics. You could look at this both ways and say, well, maybe. But as a whole, our justice system really needs to put these pieces back together. Over the last 40 years, we've watered down our justice system and the usefulness of it, and it's turned into a huge political ideology. Both sides of the fence have used it as a political tool, and that's completely opposite of what the United States of America is about. That's where I would start as a lawmaker. If I was a lawmaker, I would start with how do we take the politics out of the justice system.
All right, Eric, thanks for your comments. Requested to stay on as we proceed now to cover some news from Europe as well. Now, Germany's foreign minister, viewers, has recently stated that Europe and the US agree on numerous key security issues, reaffirming the strong transatlantic partnership. Following talks with US officials, he highlighted shared commitments to defending Ukraine, supporting its sovereignty, and maintaining peace in the Arctic region. Both sides have consistently underlined the importance of upholding international law, including territorial integrity and sovereignty, amid growing global tension. The minister stressed that European and US collaboration is critical, especially in the light of the ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine. He emphasized that transatlantic unity remains vital in countering external threats, particularly from Russia and China. Additionally, the US has pledged to address Arctic security concerns within the NATO framework, showcasing the close cooperation between the two sides. While acknowledging the alignment of interests, the minister also pointed out the importance of dialogue in managing any differences. He emphasized that diplomacy, both within the European Union and with the United States, is crucial for addressing challenges effectively. Eric, request you to join me with a quick comment on this. Of course, one minister is going on to say that ties are, still strengthening. They are still working on them. And then another minister from Germany is coming out and criticizing Trump's NATO comments over, European countries' deployments in Afghanistan before Taliban. So clearly, there is a difference as far as reactions to Trump's policies from within the European Union are concerned. How do you see these contradictions?
I mean, I think you're seeing Europe trying to figure out what to do. I don't think they have the full game plan put together or how they're going to deal with a lot of these issues that President Trump is bringing to the table. I think you're seeing some European leaders start to soften up and say, well, this could work. President Trump's plan could work. And then you're seeing some European leaders are coming out and saying, no, we're going to resist this. It didn't help where President Trump went to the World Economic Forum, and it appeared that many European leaders, uh, uh, you know, took a knee to President Trump. I don't think a lot of them like that. Some of them just said, "Hey, why fight it?" and let's just go with the program. So there's a lot of changing going on, and French President Macron stated at the World Economic Forum that the old world order is gone. It's something new's happening. So I agree with him, and I don't agree with him on many things, but I agree with his statement there that things are changing. And it's still uncertain, I believe, as to what direction Europe is going to go. But I do think that we're going to see a lot of changing of the guard go on all over the place.
Erica, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much for joining us here for this discussion. And I'm moving ahead, viewers. The European Union has launched an investigation into Elon Musk's X over its Grok AI chatbot. The probe focuses on whether the platform properly managed risks linked to the creation and sharing of sexualized deepfake images, including content involving minors. European Union officials are examining if X failed to prevent illegal content under the bloc's Digital Services Act. This marks the latest move in a growing backlash against the AI tool, which has raised global concerns over safety, ethics, and potential child exploitation. The Commission's investigation could lead to fines or other measures if X is found in violation of European Union rules. Let's listen into what the European Union Commission spokesperson Thomas Reiner had to say.
Today, the Commission is opening an investigation into Grok under the Digital Services Act because we believe that X may have breached the DSA. We have seen over the last weeks and months anti-Semitic content. We have seen non-consensual deepfakes of women, and we have seen child sexual abuse material. In Europe, no company will make money by violating our fundamental rights.
Ross Feingold, political analyst from Taipei in Taiwan, joins us in this discussion. Ross, thanks very much. Firstly, of course, Grok and X and Elon Musk, of course, now being cornered, and rightfully so. What do you think can the platform really do to prevent such sexualization of images? Of course, what we saw it had done by way of instituting a paywall doesn't really help. So how can the world leaders really come together in preventing such harmful use of AI?
The approach from the platforms, excuse me, whether it's X or other platforms or Grok, is that they're going to say we continue to improve our systems, our software, and we do our best to eliminate this kind of illegal and sick activity from our platforms. The approach from the regulators is going to continue to be that you're not doing enough and you're responsible and you have legal liability, which might include fines or other types of punishments. But there's also a very important foreign relations political aspect to this. Is it's pretty clear where this is going. The European Union is highly likely to impose fines on X or Grok. And the United States, the Trump administration, is very likely to say that this is a discriminatory action against an American company. And it'll just be one more item on the list, the growing list, of tension between the U.S. and the European Union.
All right, Ross, do stay on with me as we now proceed. Viewers, as far as the Board of Peace is concerned, for Gaza's reconstruction, there's some more news coming in. Now, Cambodia will join Trump's Board of Peace. The country's Prime Minister Hun Manet has said in a Facebook post on Monday. He stated that joining the board demonstrates Cambodia's goodwill and strong commitment to global peace. Over 35 countries have signed up to join the board, including regional Middle East powers such as Israel, Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Traditional U.S. allies, namely European countries and Canada, have been reluctant to commit to the initiative or its membership fee. Ross, how do you see Cambodia now joining the Board of Peace?
It's clear a number of countries joined the Board of Peace because they had an interest or considered themselves a stakeholder in the reconstruction of Gaza and the well-being of the civilians in Gaza, which is a very legitimate concern for a number of countries that have long considered themselves a stakeholder in the well-being of the Palestinians. A number of countries are clearly joining because they believe that it will earn them good points with President Trump. And that's not a criticism. I mean, that's just the reality of international relations and the power that the United States has. A number of countries clearly think that by joining the Board of Peace, they'll get credit with President Trump. What remains to be seen is whether or not some of these countries, including Cambodia, will actually pay cash, because under the charter of the Board of Peace, if they want to be a long-term or permanent member, there's a price to be paid, and the price is $1 billion, which could be a little expensive for countries like Cambodia. So a short-term role of the Board of Peace, it's understandable why countries would do that. Whether or not they're going to play a long-term role remains to be seen.
All right, Ross, that's all the time that I have in this discussion. Thanks very much for joining me. Moving ahead now, viewers, some more news coming in. Meta, TikTok and YouTube are all facing court this week over claims that their platforms contributed to a youth mental health crisis. The case in California Superior Courts involves a 19-year-old woman identified as KGM who says she became addicted to social media at a young age. She alleges the apps worsened her depression and led to suicidal thoughts. KGM is seeking to hold the companies legally responsible, arguing their products were deliberately designed to harm mental health. Lawyers say this is the first trial where tech giants must defend themselves in court over alleged youth harm. Mark Zuckerberg of Meta is expected to testify, and Snap CEO Evan Spiegel and has also agreed to settle. YouTube argues its platform is different from Instagram and TikTok. TikTok declined to comment ahead of the trial. That's all we have time for, viewers. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching a World of Sport on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top sports stories of the week. India crushes New Zealand in the third T20I as Abhishek Sharma's blistering 14-ball 50 and Jasprit Bumrah's clinical spell leave New Zealand helpless at just 153. India stormed through the chase in just 10 overs, securing an unassailable 3-0 lead in the series with 2 games still to play. Defending champion Jannik Sinner storms past Luciano Darteri with a dominant 6-1, 6-3, 7-6 for 2 victory, maintaining his unbeaten streak in 18 Australian Open matches. Sinner advances to the quarterfinals, continuing his quest for a second title. Manchester United pulled off a stunning 3-2 win over Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium, narrowing Arsenal's lead in the Premier League title race to just 4 points ahead of Manchester City and Aston Villa. Michael Carrick's impressive run as interim manager continues, having also defeated Man City last weekend. McLaren and Red Bull reveal their 2026 Formula One cars as pre-season testing starts in Spain. McLaren showcases a one-off livery for testing, while Red Bull introduces their new in-house engine. American Patrick Reed secured a 4-shot victory at the Dubai Desert Classic after finishing at 14 under par despite a level par 72 in the final round. Reed maintained his advantage, earning his first Rolex Series victory on the DP World Tour. And on to the first story. Now, the transfer window continues to see significant activity with key developments including Liverpool, Tottenham, Bournemouth and Arsenal. Here's the latest from the football world. Tottenham Hotspur are in talks with Liverpool over a €5 million move for Scotland captain Andy Robertson. Robertson, who's 31, is in the final months of his contract, and with the arrival of Milos Kerkez, he has made just 4 league starts this season. However, Liverpool are unlikely to sell Robertson after considering the offer. The deal was initially agreed in principle, but complications have arisen. Liverpool needed to recall left back Kostas Tsimikas from his loan at Roma, but they have been unable to do so. In addition, defender Joe Gomez suffered an injury in Liverpool's recent defeat to Bournemouth, which has further complicated the situation. Despite the offer from Tottenham, Robertson has not been actively pushing for a move, although he is keen to play more regularly ahead of this summer's World Cup. Liverpool captain Virgil van Dijk has expressed his desire for Robertson to stay, describing him as a very important member of the squad. Robertson has made 364 appearances for Liverpool, winning 9 major trophies including 2 Premier League titles and the Champions League. Meanwhile, Tottenham are looking to strengthen their left-back position after Ben Davies' ankle injury. Robertson's arrival would also allow Jed Spence to play on the right. Spurs have now recently signed 19-year-old left-back Sousa from Santos, but he is seen as a development option for the future. Liverpool have also renewed interest in Fulham's Anthony Robinson, with the 28-year-old open to a move. Robinson, who's under contract till 2028, has made more than 200 appearances for Fulham and could be a long-term option for Liverpool. Bournemouth are also close to completing the loan signing of a Lazio goalkeeper Christos Mandas for €2.6 million with an option to buy. Mandas, who's 24, has had a limited playing time this season and is looking for more regular first-team football. Finally, Arsenal have been told they will need to spend over €80 million to sign Atletico Madrid's Julian Alvarez this summer. The 25-year-old Argentina international has been in strong form this season, and with his contract running until 2030, any move would require a substantial fee. Arsenal, currently in a strong position in the Premier League title race, are looking to strengthen their squad as they push for the title. Now, with the transfer window closing on February 2, clubs are rushing to finalize deals, with many moves still up in the air. Now, joining me in this discussion is Rahul Lakhani, who is a journalist joining us from London. Rahul, thanks very much for joining me. Firstly, Tottenham is in talks with Liverpool over Andy Robertson, but Liverpool has resisted the move. What do you make of Liverpool's stance, and does Robertson really have a future with the club?
Well, I think it would have been a surprise if Liverpool let Robertson go in the middle of the season. Even though he's not first choice anymore, he's still a really crucial player. And we saw that at the weekend. Milos Kerkez has failed to really convince since he's joined Liverpool. And Kerkez actually came off at half-time for Robertson against Bournemouth. And despite not starting many games in the league, Liverpool still have a Champions League campaign, an FA Cup campaign, and a player such as Robertson provides a lot of experience. So I'd have been shocked if they let him go without any sort of replacement coming in. And I think if Tsimikas was to come in from Roma, it looks like Roma won't sanction that without a replacement themselves. I do think that's still a downgrade on Robertson. Robertson is a Liverpool legend. He's one of the best left-backs Liverpool have ever had, and his experience will still prove invaluable in what has been a tough season for them. So I would have been shocked if they let him go just for the sake of a few £1 million, unless Robertson pushed for the move. He does want to play ahead of the World Cup. I think regardless of how much he plays, he will be a starter at the World Cup. He's a crucial player for Scotland. So I don't think his place is in any danger, but I can see why he would want to get himself fit. But even at Tottenham, I think he would have made a lot of sense for them to add more experience to their back line. But yeah, I'm not surprised in the slightest that Liverpool have now taken the stance that they don't want to let him go.
Now, Liverpool is also renewing their interest in Fulham's Anthony Robinson as a long-term option, while Tottenham is looking to strengthen their left-back position. Which player do you think would be the better fit for Liverpool?
Well, I think Robinson could be a good fit in the summer. I can't see it happening in January. But even in the long term, he's 28.
Yeah.
I don't think he's an upgrade on Kirkes or even Robertson at this point. He's a very good player. But this season, he's not shown the attacking threat as he did last season. He recorded 10 assists in the Premier League last season and 0 so far. So, and it depends on the price. He's under contract until 2028, which means that Liverpool might be able to get him in a cut price deal in the summer, and then he could rotate with Kirkes. If he moves to Tottenham, that would be a good signing for them, in the sense that he would add experience, depth, another attacking option on the left. But with Destiny Udogie there, with Jed Spence there as well, I'm not sure if they need numbers as much as they need game-changing quality. And whilst Robinson has shown that in the past, this season he's not been at his best. But I do think he would make more sense for Liverpool in the summer. I think Andy Robertson will leave Liverpool, just not right now. And when he does go, he could go to Tottenham and Robinson could go to Liverpool to replace him. And I think that could be a good move for all parties, but it would depend on the price.
Rahul, now talking about Arsenal, they've been told they'll have to pay over €80 million for Julian Alvarez. Now, while Bournemouth is also finalizing a loan deal for Christos Mendes, which of these deals do you think will have the biggest impact on the remainder of the season?
Well, I can't see Arsenal moving for Alvarez until the summer. I think in the summer he will be a huge target for them and for Barcelona and for a lot of other clubs. The problem is for Alvarez is that he's actually not had a good season himself. He's not scored an open play goal in La Liga for the last 15 games, but he's still a World Cup winner, a Champions League winner, someone with proven quality. And I think in the summer, if Arsenal do move for him, it's because they want a multifaceted attack. Their attack is struggling right now, where Victor Gyökeres, Gabriel Jesus, even Bukayo Saka, they're all struggling for goals. And so maybe they do want Alvarez to, as proven quality, to kind of get their creativity up a level. But right now, I can't see it happening in January at all. I can't see Atletico letting him go in January. And if they were to let him go, it'd be more than €80 million. And then if we go to the deal for Bournemouth, I think bringing in Lazio's goalkeeper is a good move for them. When they signed George Petrovic in the summer, he was brought in as a long-term number one option, but so far he's really failed to convince. And the goalkeeper coming in, he's coming in on loan with an obligation to buy if he makes a certain amount of appearances. Now, what this means is that he will either establish himself as first choice, and then the move will be activated permanently, and by next season he'll be the first choice, or if he fails to convince, then he'll go back to the bench, and they may terminate the loan at the end of the season. So I think it's a really good move for Bournemouth right now. I think in the second half of the season will give them a boost defensively, where they've struggled for results in the last few months, but I think just a more experienced head through in between the sticks could help them, having lost so many defenders and their goalkeeper last summer.
Right, Rahul, thanks then very much for joining me in this discussion with your perspective. And now moving ahead, viewers, let's track some T20I cricket news. Now, India have stormed to an emphatic 8-wicket victory over New Zealand in Guwahati, taking an unassailable 3-0 lead in the T20 series. Chasing 154 to win, India's opener Abhishek Sharma led the charge with a blistering 68 off just 20 balls, including a sensational 14-ball 50, marking India's second fastest ever in T20 internationals. His explosive start set the tone for India's dominant chase. Alongside him, Surya Kumar Yadav played an instrumental role, scoring an unbeaten 57 off 26 balls and finishing the chase with consecutive boundaries. The pair's partnership was the backbone of India's victory as they chased down the target with 10 overs to spare. New Zealand, batting first, posted a total of 153 for 9. Their innings never gained momentum as India's bowlers put on a clinical performance. Jasprit Bumrah was the standout, claiming 3 wickets for just 17 runs, while Ravi Bishnoi provided excellent support with 2 wickets for 30. Hardik Pandya also contributed with 2 wickets, and the pressure was maintained throughout the innings. Glenn Phillips top scored for New Zealand with 48 runs, but he lacked support from the other end. India's chase, however, wasn't without its drama. Sanju Samson was dismissed for a golden duck off the first ball by New Zealand seamer Matt Henry, leaving India 0 for 1. But Abhishek and Ishan Kishan quickly rebuilt their innings with a rapid 53-run partnership in just 19 balls. Abhishek's onslaught continued as he reached his half-century with a 6 off the final ball of the power play, narrowly missing Yuvraj Singh's record for the fastest T20 R50 by an Indian. As Abhishek continued to dominate, Surya Kumar Yadav came in and took over, finishing the match in style. His 57 not out, along with Abhishek's explosive knock, made light work of the target. New Zealand's bowlers had no answers to India's firepower, and they were left to watch as India cruised to victory. Now, this commanding win has given India an unassailable 3-0 lead with 2 games still to play in the series. It also marks a perfect response after their loss in the preceding one-day international series against New Zealand. With the T20 World Cup just around the corner, India's performances in this series sends a strong message to the world that they are in top form ahead of their defense of the title. The series now moves to Visakhapatnam for the 4th T20 with India firmly in control. And I welcome
Messages doesn't support the group for 4th T20 India in control.
Ritik Dhanani, who is a sports commentator and presenter from New Delhi in this discussion. Ritik, thanks very much for joining me. Firstly, Abhishek Sharma's 14 ball 50 was a game changer. How does this performance impact his role in India's T20 squad going forward?
Thank you, Kriti, for having me. I think the way India is planning to play the T20I format, I think it fits perfectly with how Abhishek is doing it. I think for the last 1.5 years, the kind of intensity he has shown in his batting, plus along with that, at the consistency with which he's scoring runs, I think that clearly showcases how India is looking to play this format in the next few years as well. Even in the New Zealand series also, the idea was to finish the game in the power play, and that's what Abhishek was trying to do. He got out on a duck on the previous game in the second T20I, but still continued to play in the same manner, and I think that's the reason why India have been so dominating, because their top order has been in really good form. Tilak is not available in the series, but when Ishan has walked in at number 3, he has also done really well. But I think the main reason why India has been so dominating in the last 1.5 years, I think we have to say that Abhishek Sharma is probably one of the bigger reasons behind India's success.
Now with Bumrah and Bishnoi also bowling a masterclass, how crucial is India's bowling depth in T20s as they prepare for the World Cup?
I think with India, one good thing they have done is that they have tried a lot of players in last 1.5 years. So now if you talk about Ravi Bishnoi, he's coming in after a long time, but because he was playing domestic cricket regularly and he got some chances with India a few months back, so he was match ready. If you talk about Bumrah also, the way they have rotated him has kept him away from the injuries, and at the same time the other bowlers as well. If you talk about Varun Chakravarti, number 1 ranked T20I bowler, whenever Arshdeep comes in, he has ability to deliver. We talk about Harshit Rana, he is slowly and steadily getting into a space where he can be a 3 format player. So the kind of talent India has picked for the T20 World Cup, they have given them good chances and they have rotated them nicely. At this moment, everyone is looking in good form, and that's the reason why the flexibility we talk about. They can pick in any 4 bowlers right now out of the squad and they will deliver it for them.
Right, talking about New Zealand, they've showed early promise but failed to maintain momentum. What strategies can they really adopt to combat India's dominance?
I think with New Zealand, I think we have to say that if you talk about the 2 T20Is, the second and the third one, they didn't win the toss. And normally in these conditions, whenever you are playing in India, and more importantly around January or February, there is a lot of dew. So any team that's bowling second obviously is in a very difficult position altogether, especially against a team like this in which there's Hardik Pandya, Shivam Dubey, now Rinku Singh adding to it. It anyways takes a lot of things away from the bowling unit. So I think in the two T20Is, if they would have bowled first, I would have still said that things could have been better for New Zealand. But if we talk about the team balance also, at this moment, Finn Allen was not available in the first three T20Is, who has been one of their most prominent T20I batters. He was playing Big Bash League, so he'll be probably available now for the fourth T20. If you talk about Tim Seifert as well, one of the openers who got into this second T20I, I don't think so that New Zealand were having their complete proper squad for the T20 right now in the first three T20s. But now moving forward, in the fourth T20, we'll be seeing Finn Allen also coming into the picture. But more important, I think, has been the middle order. The kind of expectations that were there from Mark Chapman or Daryl Mitchell or Glenn Phillips, I don't think so the middle order of New Zealand has performed up to the expectations.
Right. All right, Ritik, thanks for your comments. We'll leave it at that for now. And moving on, viewers, we're now going to track some motor sports news. Now, Formula One is heading into a brand new era, and the paddock is already feeling the scale of change as teams prepare for what is being called the biggest reset in the sport's history. The 2026 season brings a complete technical overhaul, new cars, new power units, new tires, and fully sustainable fuel, forcing pre-season testing to begin earlier than ever with a private January run at Barcelona. Ferrari and Mercedes have set the early tone. Lewis Hamilton has described working on Ferrari's new car as fascinating, calling 2026 the biggest technical challenge of his career. Mercedes, meanwhile, are being tipped as early favorites as they look to capitalize on the rule reset after struggling under the previous regulations. World champions McLaren have admitted the scale of change has created an unprecedented workload. Team boss Andrea Stella says the simultaneous changes to chassis, engines and tires have forced hard trade-offs, with McLaren choosing to delay their first run at Barcelona to maximize performance. The ongoing test will be held behind closed doors at the circuit at the Barcelona, Catalonia, with no media access and each team limited to 3 days of running, focusing purely on data and reliability. Not every team will be present. Williams have confirmed they will miss the Barcelona team test after delays, completing their new car, shifting their focus on the Bahrain test in February. The new rules are also expected to change how racing looks, with energy management playing a key role in overtaking and strategy. Adding to the sense of a new chapter, Cadillac will join the grid in 2026 as Formula One's 11th team, with Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas leading the project. All eyes now turn to Melbourne, where the first Grand Prix will offer the first real clue as to who has adapted fastest and who still has work to do. And I welcome Charanjit Singh Kohli, senior F1 writer from Sportskeeda, in this discussion. Charanjit, why is secrecy around pre-season testing really important for teams, and how could it really impact their preparation for the 2026 F1 season?
So the secrecy, I think it comes down to a lot of what happened in 2014. So before, the current power unit that we have, it's a V6 turbo hybrid that we had in 2025. The last time we had a major change in terms of power units, it was in 2014, where we switched from V8 naturally aspirated engines to the V6 turbo hybrids. At that time, on the very first day on the broadcast, we had very little running. Cars were stopping on track, left, right, and center, and the maximum number of laps, I think it was done by Kimi Raikkonen. He had just around 30 laps or so. So that was not great optics for the sport, and what that led to was a lot of negativity before even the racing had begun. As the testing continued, things evolved, things started getting a bit better, but by the time the entire testing was done, the preseason testing was done, there was a lot of speculation on how the racing is going to be and if the cars would even last an entire race. So it seems that is one of the reasons why at least the teams and Formula One, they're trying to suppress as much negativity as they can, keep the messaging as much positive as possible. And that is primarily the reason why the Barcelona test, it's been run behind closed doors. it seems that the first Bahrain test, it will also be, at least for now, that is the information that has come out. The first Bahrain test is also going to be behind closed doors, and we'll have just 1 hour highlights and key updates at the end of the day. The reason, it's pretty simple. They're trying to suppress as much negativity as possible, keep a control on what messages actually get out. And even though so today the preseason test has begun in Barcelona, and contrary to what a lot of people expected, the running has been decent. Aston Martin is not running today. They will probably be running on Thursday. So Honda has 0 mileage for now, but other power units, they've had decent runs. Ferrari crossed 100 lap barrier already. So at least the fears in terms of reliability, they are a bit unfounded. For now, it's fine. For now, it's probably better than what the situation was in 2014. So, yeah.
One final question, Charanjit, before we wrap up this discussion. McLaren have admitted to the unprecedented workload for 26. Given this, do you think they're making the right decision by delaying their first run at Barcelona to focus on maximizing performance for the season?
Yeah, so what McLaren has done is they've changed their approach. The conventional approach that a lot of teams will follow is they'll bring a Spec A car in the first test in Barcelona today, and they will try to run that car for the first test and probably for the second test as well before bringing a major upgrade for the final test in Bahrain or pre-Australia, the first race. That's a very conventional approach that a lot of teams follow. What the reason behind it is simply because they want to analyze how the power unit is working. The entire focus will be on power management. What McLaren has done is, and they've launched their car today, the process and the approach that they are following is they've basically brought the car that they're going to run in Melbourne, which is in March. So what they are going to do is that they'll have a complex product already in place, and they'll try to learn and analyze this product as much as they can by the time they reach the first race. So the reason why this is a bit of a different approach is they'll probably have a slightly outdated car compared to what other teams would, but they'll have a larger scope of direction that they can take, and they'll probably look at what the rivals are doing and then try to go for the best possible solution. Now, in the era of cost cap, it makes sense to a certain extent because they're hedging their bets on a long-term thing. It's a long-term project for them. Maybe by mid-season they are catching up and doing a better job compared to other teams. But yeah, it's a different approach. Whether it works or not, it's entirely, we'll see.
Sure, we'll indeed watch out for that. Charanjit, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And now on to some tennis news. Viewers, Carlos Alcaraz is through to the quarterfinals of the Australian Open after a straight set victory over Tommy Paul. The world #1 triumphed 7-6, 6-4, 7-5, showing impressive resilience after facing an early defeat. He'll face Australia's Alex de Minaur next in what promises to be an exciting showdown. In a blow to the tournament, two-time champion Naomi Osaka withdrew from her third-round match against Madison Inglis, citing a recurring abdominal injury. The 28-year-old had been struggling with the issue, and despite warming up for her match, she ultimately pulled out to avoid further damage. Madison Inglis, benefiting from Osaka's withdrawal, is set to face Polish second seed Iga Swiatek in her first ever Grand Slam fourth round. Inglis, who called this opportunity a life-changing moment, has stunned the tennis world with her progress. In men's singles, Novak Djokovic advances to the quarterfinals after Jacob Mensing withdrew due to an abdominal injury. The Serbian will face either Lorenzo Musetti or Taylor Fritz for a spot in the semi-finals. Let's listen in to what Naomi Osaka had to say.
It was a really sad decision for me. I really wanted to play, and I had every intention to go play. So honestly, I'm still kind of processing it as it's happening. I first noticed the issue in my last match. So that's why I had to take a medical. And then I thought it would get better, like if I had a break day, but it kind of got worse.
And viewers, that's all the time that we have on the world of sports. Thanks for staying tuned.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Kriti Mehta. You're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Through a post on Truth Social, US President Donald Trump announces the deployment of border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota while attacking Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Federal officials are standing firm on their account of the Minneapolis shooting as video evidence appears to contradict key elements of their narrative. The case intensified political scrutiny, public anger, and renewed debate over federal law enforcement accountability in the U.S. Protesters gather in Minneapolis to demand federal immigration agents leave after a 37-year-old man was fatally shot by Border Patrol, intensifying local outrage. Governor Tim Walz calls on President Trump to withdraw the agents as demonstrations and political tension grow over the incident. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney is likely to visit India in the early March as Ottawa steps up efforts to diversify trade away from the United States, focus on agreements on uranium, energy, critical minerals, AI, and quantum computing. The Kremlin on Monday said the U.S. trilateral talks in the UAE between Russia and Ukrainian negotiators had been held in a constructive spirit, but that there was significant work ahead still. Philippines authorities are searching for survivors after a passenger ferry sinks in southern waters, leaving at least 18 dead and many still missing. European Union investigates Elon Musk's social media X over whether Grok violated rules and disseminated illegal content such as manipulated sexualized images in the European Union. A private jet carrying 8 crashed in flames as it was taking off from a Mane airport with 8 aboard, but their fate and identities are not yet known. And viewers, in some fresh news that we are bringing you, a post on Truth Social from US President Donald Trump is now announcing the deployment of Tom Homan to Minnesota. Homan is Trump's border czar, known for his work in immigration enforcement. He will be reporting directly to Donald Trump, the US president. While Homan has not previously worked in Minnesota, Trump emphasized his strong reputation and fairness, stating Homan knows and likes many people in the region. This move comes as anti-ICE protests continue to escalate following the fatal shooting of a Minneapolis man by Border Patrol agents. Trump also mentioned an ongoing investigation into a massive $20 billion welfare fraud case in Minnesota, linking it to the recent unrest. Furthermore, Trump highlighted a probe involving Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, alleging discrepancies between her financial status and her past. Joining me now in this discussion is Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, who is a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst, joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Collins, thanks very much for joining me. Firstly, what do we know? Thanks for joining once again. What do we really know about Homan? Now Trump is calling him a czar, really, border czar, and what can we expect with his deployment?
Well, we have seen how the incident has raised further tensions, and of course, it has been a systemic, issue. And we have seen how also the responses from the Minnesota officials have been strong, criticizing the extent of the actions being taken, and also demanding the withdrawal of the federal agents. And this is going to, of course, prolong without, further credible, actions or, the narratives being sent to quell these rising, tensions and dissatisfactions. We've seen also these, protesters and, public unrest. And this is taking much more of a divisive partisan line. And, of course, the narratives have been set, the arguments have been set on both sides as to the actions being taken, but the community anger over this back-to-back incidents, the call for accountability, but the parallel arguments from the other side saying that in reacting to the exact detail of the situation as to how there have been disputes on whether weapons have been shown, have been brandished to incur such reactions. But this is going again, as I've stated. It's not a recent issue. This has been ongoing for decades now in terms of the actions being taken by law enforcement units, and how traditionally this has been a point of contention by both sides. But I don't see this to be yet another factor for the Trump administration to backtrack. And of course, I foresee that the current administration will also outline the true, outlines the timelines of the incidents, and that they need to be seen as strong in terms of the core issue of illegal immigrants, and also on the works being done by the ICE agents, and all the past actions and past legacies of ICE also, especially under the purview of the Trump administration. So I don't foresee that with this sustained tensions or community anger, that will force a much bigger backtrack by the Trump administration. But of course there will be some further evaluations of the tactics or the actions being taken. But I foresee that there will be some changes in terms of how in the future engagement with the people, with the immigrants, or with the public will be held to ensure that these things will not happen again in the future.
Right, Collins, thank you for your comment. I request you to stay on. We now move on, viewers. Now, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul on Monday criticized Russia's stubborn insistence on territorial issues following last week's trilateral talks in Abu Dhabi with Russian, Ukrainian and US envoys. Waitful warned that without flexibility from Moscow, negotiations could take much longer or fail at this stage. He emphasized that the territorial issue remains a major sticking point in efforts to resolve the Ukrainian conflict and called for the constructive engagement from all parties to achieve meaningful progress. Collins requested to join me back in the discussion here. Of course, the European leaders will attack Russia as far as the peace dialogue is concerned, and Russia's what many are saying maximalist demands. But Russia, of course, is hell-bent on its Anchorage formula, which means for Ukraine to cede its territory. What really do you think can be the outcomes from these trilateral talks, and if peace is anywhere near in sight?
Yeah, we have seen how the statement is less about rhetoric but more about setting red lines. This is a signal from Berlin that any peace framework in the future, must not, be at the expense of, territorial integrity of Ukraine and hence the territorial integrity of Europe as a whole. So this is unacceptable to Germany, to Europe, and this reflects a much more hardened stance by Europe on the consensus that territorial integrity and national sovereignty are the core fundamentals that cannot be negotiated regardless of economic costs, regardless of war fatigue. So Germany is now pushing back quite hard against Russian maximalism, and that this is also in line with the need by Europe to show a hardened stance in order to defend the interests of Ukraine, which is now linked to the security and defense of Europe as a whole. So this marks a shift from Germany's posture, from a more values-based response now to a more security-driven stance, and to portray this hardened European stance opposing Russian actions, and of course also this will also compel other European nations to have similar stance and sentiments. But the key fundamental will be, of course, peace cannot be conditional on the basis of legitimizing force, and this is afraid this is Berlin is also wary of the fact that this might set a precedent far beyond Ukraine, and this will affect the future security of Germany and Europe as a whole. So now Germany is saying clearly that there can be some compromises in terms of agreements on the peace process, in terms of the deadlines or the timelines, or maybe the content of the security guarantees, and maybe the sanctions and all that, but not on sovereignty, not on territorial integrity, not on the rights of Ukraine to have these regions and the territories that belong to them, and not to be compromised by any actions by Russia. So this is a new shift. But again, as I've stated, I don't foresee the impact of Germany's responses to the entire peace process and peace agreement. Most importantly will be the role being played by President Trump and Washington, and the trilateral peace process involving Ukraine, Russia and the US. I don't foresee the extent or the depth or the volume of the role or the impact of Europe, or whether Germany, whether France, to have any kind of profound impact on derailing the entire peace process, with the greater role being played, the influence being played by the Trump administration as a whole. So I don't foresee that to derail the whole process.
Right, Collins, thanks once again here for your comments. Request you to stay on as we move ahead, viewers. There's some breaking news now coming in. In fact, the Israeli military has confirmed that it has recovered the remains of Israeli police officer Ran Juili, the last hostage held in Gaza. His return marks the completion of a key condition in US President Donald Trump's plan to end the Gaza war. This development follows the handover of Thai agricultural worker Sud Thisakerin Thalak in December 2023, with Juili's remains now returned. The recovery of all hostages, both living and deceased, marks a significant milestone in the ongoing war. All right. And now moving on, viewers, some news from China, where President Xi Jinping has moved to strengthen ties with Vietnam in a phone call with its newly reappointed leader, To Lam. This was the first contact between the two leaders since To Lam was unanimously confirmed to lead Vietnam's ruling Communist Party for another 5 years. Chinese state media said Xi emphasized deeper cooperation between Beijing and Hanoi on regional and global issues and called for stronger communication and mutual trust. The call comes despite a long history of mistrust and territorial disputes between the two countries, including over the South China Sea. At the same time, Vietnam has been expanding its engagement with the United States, even as China and the US maintain a fragile tariff truce. She also warned of global risks and said both sides must work to manage challenges and avoid confrontation, signaling Beijing's intent to keep Vietnam close as regional competition intensifies. All right, Collins requested to join me back in the discussion here. Of course, Vietnam is a communist country, and ties with China are expected to be rather good, but with the To Lam taking over the country, what changes, if any, we can expect?
Well, Vietnam will continue to to hedge, and of course also the policy of Vietnam has always been to seek strategic alignment, not an outright alliance with any other party. Of course, he has been treating China as a critical partner, closest neighbor. Of course, also trying also to have these deeper friend-sharing efforts with the West, especially with the US. And Vietnam is viewed with great importance by Beijing in terms of being a strategic power in the southern flank. And also, of course, we've seen how it remains an important swing state in Southeast Asia. So Beijing wants to keep Vietnam close to its orbit in all aspects, in economic terms and, of course, in geopolitical terms, and to prevent Vietnam from falling into the influence of other Western countries, especially the US. So we have seen how the bamboo diplomacy concept of Vietnam and the four no's, no alliance, no outright, military alliance with other powers, and no use of force and all that. So these have been seen to be great to be good by Beijing in terms of keeping Vietnam as it is. And of course, Hanoi is also looking forward for greater economic collaboration with Beijing, but also at the same time has been wary of the actions by Beijing, especially in South China Sea. And Vietnam is not, is not afraid to show a credible show of force if needed as a deterrence against China in South China Sea. But this outreach is also meant as a key messaging tool to Southeast Asia that China is a partner and is looking to extend this partnership beyond other sectors, including on economic relationship. But of course also Vietnam's rise and the importance of Vietnam to both powers, to both Beijing and Washington, has been profound. And that with this new National Congress in Vietnam and with the consolidation of power by To Lam, we will foresee that it will continue to have this kind of strategic hedging with both powers. But I foresee that at the same time also To Lam will continue to also seek greater defense ties with the US as an insurance, as a key fallback option, while at the same time, again, not to send a wrong message to Beijing and to President Xi. And To Lam will continue to have this, to have a deeper economic partnership. And of course, it cannot be seen, or you cannot afford to have this, a new ties that will be strained by wariness. And of course, they both share the same ideological narratives. And China will still remain an important economic partner to Vietnam, especially with the new transition towards this new 2030 vision, 2045 vision, which will need greater economic support from external powers, especially from China, with regards to whether supply chain resilience or energy transition, infrastructure connectivity. And Vietnam is seen as the key gateway to Southeast Asia in that regard. So I don't see any deterioration of economic ties between both powers. But on security and military terms, I foresee that the US will continue to remain largely in the radar of Vietnam. But again, this will be done under the mantra and concept of strategic hedging, not an outright alliance. And this status quo will continue at least for the years to come, especially under the leadership of Tolam.
Right, Collins, thanks very much once again. Moving on, viewers, let's cover some news from Indonesia, which has received its first 3 Rafale fighter jets from France as part of a multi-billion-dollar defense deal. The delivery marks a significant upgrade to Indonesia's aging military fleet. The aircraft, manufactured by Dassault Aviation, were confirmed by the country's defense ministry to be ready for use by the Indonesian Air Force. They arrived at Rosemin Nurjadin Air Base in Pekanbaru, Sumatra. As part of the $8 billion deal signed in 2020, Indonesia has placed an order for up to 42 Rafales along with French frigates and submarines. Indonesia has been actively seeking to enhance its defense capabilities with several other options under consideration, including China's J-10 and the US-made F-15X fighter jets. Alright, now moving ahead, viewers, this week Meta, TikTok and YouTube are facing legal action in California Superior Court over allegations that their platforms have contributed to a mental health crisis among youth. The case centers on a 19-year-old woman identified as KGM, who claims she became addicted to social media at a young age, leading to worsened depression and suicidal thoughts. KGM is seeking to hold these tech companies accountable, asserting that their platforms were intentionally designed to harm mental health. Lawyers argue that this is the first trial in which major tech companies must defend themselves against claims of causing harm to young users. Meta's CEO Mark Zuckerberg is expected to testify, while Snap CEO Evan Spiegel has opted to settle. Meanwhile, YouTube contends that its platform differs from Instagram and TikTok in its impact on youth mental health. Dr. Bhavna Barmi, clinical psychologist from New Delhi, joins me in this discussion. Dr. Bhavna, thanks very much for joining us. Firstly, how do you see the case itself? This is the first time that a teenager has come out and filed a legal suit alleging that these social media platforms, including YouTube as well, contributed to her deteriorating mental health and worsened her depression. Do you really think it's going to set a precedent in the right direction?
You know, what I would say is that, yes, mental health challenges are associated with adolescent social media use. And there are a lot of emotional and mood-related challenges that take place. I would like to bring to our focus that there is increased anxiety due to constant comparisons, evaluations, and fear of missing out, what we all know as FOMOs. Depressive symptoms are linked to perceived inadequacies, rejection, sensitivity, and even validation dependence. Along with this, on the mental health forum, there is a lot of mood instability and irritability from emotional overstimulation and sleep deprivation, which is evident. So what is very important is that we need to actually understand that there are a lot of self-concept and identity-related challenges that can come about, which are surfacing. So there is low self-esteem that comes about by metric-based self-worth, which is like, how many likes do I have? How many followers do I have? How many views do I have? There is a lot of mental health related to body image dissatisfactions due to exposure to idealized and filtered representations. There is also what we call in psychology identity diffusion, as external feedback replaces internal self-definition and self-worth. So I feel there are a lot of cognitive and behavioral challenges which come about. There's reduced attention span, difficulty with sustained focus, a lot of compulsive checking behaviors, resembling something like behavioral addiction patterns. Procrastination and academic disengagement due to attentional fragmentation. There is also a lot of social and interpersonal challenges. Heightened peer pressure and conformity. Superficial connections replacing deep relational bonds. So there's increased loneliness despite higher perceived connectivity.
Yeah.
So one does need to look at all this when we are looking at very rightly what you are saying. And of course, mental health challenges are coming more than ever before.
All right. What do you think really can be done to upend these challenges that now come up from social media? Many countries have already moved to ban social media usage for teens. But for those countries that still allow the usage for minors, what really do you think should be done as far as parental supervision is concerned, or community supervision is concerned, whether in schools or other institutions?
What I would like to say is that there is a lot of strong psychological evidence that says that family dynamics, school and peers are primary risk or even protective factors. So we need to focus on the strong evidence which says psychologically that secure attachments, emotionally responsive caregiving, supportive school climates and healthy peer belonging are going to buffer against anxiety and depression. And conversely, if we see emotional neglect, high academic pressure, authoritarian or invalidating family systems, or chronic peer rejections, create a kind of a baseline vulnerability. So when we look at digital media, it is going to be best understood as a risk amplifier, which intensifies these existing insecurities, which externalizes peer hierarchies, which makes comparison constant, quantified, and also sometimes inescapable. If a child is psychologically resilient, social media may be annoying or neutral. But what is to be understood is that if a child is already vulnerable, it becomes pathogenic. So, what I'm saying is, think of social media like air pollution. It causes weak lungs, but it devastates people who already have them. So we definitely need to get some legislations into place. And these are very, very important. Like you're already saying that there are certain places where these legislations are being put into account. And that is something that we should be able to think of. So if we are looking at what bans can do, I would say that bans can actually, 1, delay exposure during the critical neurodevelopmental windows. 2, it can reduce the baseline usage. 3, it signals social accountability and responsibility, and it forces platform accountability. So to understand that these can be preventive, yet we need to still teach emotional regulation. We still need to fix family systems. We still need to improve school environments. We need to replace social belonging, and we need to address underlying distress. So I would say what actually would work would be an evidence-aligned approach where we design regulation. So there should be no infinite scroll for minors, for example. No algorithm personalization for children under 18. A default time limit and stopping cues should be generated. And I think very importantly, digital literacy as psychological literacy is important. Teaching our children, especially adolescents, how persuasion, comparison, and reward systems work. So this meta-awareness is going to reduce the harm. Our family level interventions are very, very important. The parent emotional coaching, the media co-regulation, not just surveillance, is going to be important.
Right.
So I think it's a very multifaceted approach that we need.
Right. Well, we'll watch out, Dr. Burmi, how those proceedings go, and if any recommendations or regulations can come out for the social media giants to take on. But for now, thanks very much for joining me in this discussion. It was a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure completely.
And now moving ahead, viewers, there's some news coming in from Greece, where a fire has erupted following an explosion at a biscuit factory near Trikala in central Greece, killing at least 3 people and leaving 2 others missing. 8 of the 13 workers escaped while investigators and disaster response teams arrived at the scene. 6 people, including a firefighter, were treated in hospital for respiratory issues, but none are in life-threatening condition, as per officials. The factory owner, Virulanta SA, said the cause of the blast remains unclear. Authorities are continuing search and rescue operations as they investigate the incident. And viewers, that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights.
Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from around the world. Now, as Western governments continue to champion human rights as the foundation of the rules-based order, global data is telling a different story. Political freedoms are declining, authoritarianism is rising, and strategic aliens and allies are often exempt from consequences. From West Asia to China, geopolitics appears to increasingly overrule universal norms. Joining us today for this discussion is Kenneth Roth, who is one of the world's most prominent human rights voices. He served for nearly 3 decades as Executive Director of Human Rights Watch and is now a visiting professor at Princeton University. Thank you for joining us here on Focal Length.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Roth, let's begin with the first question then. Since the end of the Cold War, Western governments have framed human rights as central to the international order, yet global freedoms continue to decline. Has human rights enforcement entered a phase of managed decline rather than principled defense in your perspective?
Well, I think this is certainly a challenging period for human rights. I think we should recognize that most pressure for human rights comes from within the country. We see this in Iran, where protesters are taking to the street trying to achieve democracy in their country. They've been killed by the thousands, but clearly the principal pressure for human rights is domestic. Now, what you point out is that the international community is inconsistent in its defense of human rights. That has always been the case. I mean, you talk about the principal defense of human rights. I wish that was so. What we've seen instead is selective defense. And these days, the US government under Trump is largely outside of defending human rights. Every once in a while, he's concerned about something, but mostly he's not. The European Union has been, much less aggressive than it used to be. So we are seeing a decline in global support for human rights, but the popular demand for human rights is still very much there.
Right. Mr. Roth, now with sustained military aid to Israel alongside settlement expansion and recurring civilian casualties in Gaza, at what point does Western backing cross from alliance into complicity under international law?
Oh, it's already at complicity. I think it's safe to say that the U.S. government in particular, which gives $3.8 billion in military aid every year to Israel, it is aiding and abetting the genocide in Gaza, the apartheid in the West Bank, and the war crimes that we've seen committed in both places. You know, the war crimes of indiscriminately bombing Palestinian civilians in Gaza and the war crime of settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank. So we are, way past just, ordinary complicity. We're into criminal aiding and abetting. That much is clear.
Right, and as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, it continues mass executions and repression while remaining a key Western arms buyer and energy partner. What does this really reveal about true limits of Western red lines?
Well, you're asking me about Saudi Arabia, but I would include in that question the United Arab Emirates.
Right.
They both are very similarly situated. Each is a monarchical dictatorship. Each tolerates no dissent whatsoever. Each has been involved in war crimes abroad. The Saudis in bombing civilians in Yemen, the Emiratis most recently in arming the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary in Sudan as it was committing genocide. And in each of these cases, there may be quiet representations to them by Western governments, but because they're both rich, because they have a lot of money to spend, there's been very little public pressure on them to stop, either their domestic repression or their external support for very abusive actors, as in Sudan.
Right, and despite the mass detentions and political repression that we are seeing in Egypt, it remains a major recipient of Western support. Has stability really replaced democratic legitimacy as the West's primary concern? Mr. Rod.
Egypt is a good example of the utter hypocrisy when it comes to Western support for human rights sometimes. And so, the government of then General, now President Sisi, we have to remember, he launched a coup against a democratically elected president, the first democratically elected president Egypt ever had, Mohamed Morsi. And in the course of committing that coup, they killed more than 800 people in the course of basically 12 hours in crushing a sit-in and stopping protests against the military government. Since then, there's been large-scale political imprisonment, systematic torture, but Western governments, the U.S. continues to send $1.3 billion in annual assistance to Egypt, and they basically ignore Egypt's repression because it's seen as a source of stability in the region and because President Sisi promises to help Europeans curtail migration to Europe. So it's a very cynical calculation that essentially sees Western governments closing their eyes to what has been by far the most repressive government in Egypt's modern history.
Let's also then talk about Turkey, Mr. Roth. Turkey, of course, remains a NATO ally despite democratic backsliding and media repression. It's also now joined the Board of Peace. Does alliance membership now shield governments from accountability rather than reinforce democratic norms?
Turkey has very much benefited from its strategic location. To put this in perspective, President Erdogan, for the first time, is facing a very serious challenge. The mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, is, according to the polls, would have won the next presidential election. He's much more popular than Erdogan. So what Erdogan did was to concoct various criminal charges and threw him in prison. He basically got rid of the political opposition. And do we hear large-scale protests against this? No, because Turkey is seen as, very important in helping Ukraine fend off Russia's invasion. It's seen as playing an important role in Syria, even though it's a very mixed role. And of course, Erdogan has also cooperated in stemming the flow of migrants to Europe. All of this has added up to basically immunity for the Erdogan government from serious pressure against its very severely diminishing human rights record.
All right, now on to China. We've all heard about allegations of human rights abuses there, and they're also widely documented, yet global responses are limited. Is economic dependence also then constraining accountability and weakening international norms?
Well, in the case of China's pervasive use of forced labor on the part of the Uyghurs, the United States did something decent under the Biden administration. It adopted legislation called the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act, which created a presumption against any imports from Xinjiang, the northwestern province of China, where most of the Uyghurs live. And that was very effective because it largely cut off the product of Uyghur forced labor coming to the United States. Sadly, Europe has not been as effective. Europe has a policy saying, oh, we're against forced labor, but they don't have this presumption against imports from Xinjiang. And because China keeps its supply chain secret, if you ask Europe, why are you letting in all this cotton? Or why are you letting all this polysilicon? Despite the extensive use of forced labor in these industries, they say, oh, well, we don't have any evidence that forced labor was used in this case. But you never have direct evidence because China covers it up. And Europe has refused to adopt a similar presumption as the United States. So as a result, imports from Xinjiang are increasing while they've plummeted in the United States.
Right, and Mr. Roth, now human rights also appear least enforceable in some of the democratically valuable states. If universality collapses under strategic pressure, what do you think, what future does international human rights law have?
Well, I think we have to recognize that international human rights law reflects people's very natural aspirations. I've traveled all over the world. I've never met somebody who wants to be summarily executed, who wants to be tortured or arbitrarily detained or denied housing or health care or employment. So these are universal aspirations. But what we've discussed here is that other governments' willingness to uphold those rights depends on other geopolitical factors. And frankly, India is a big beneficiary of that. Under the Modi government, India has quite systematically tolerated violence and discrimination against the very large Muslim population. But because India is seen as an important market, it's seen as a counter to China, it gets away with this with very little pressure. So, this is another failing of the international system. And I think it's important to press for much more consistent upholding of human rights standards, even when the repressive government is economically or geopolitically valuable.
Right. Thank you then, Mr. Kenneth Roth, for joining me and for sharing your insights on Focal Length here at NewsX World.
Thank you so much for having me.
And viewers, with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Focal Length. For more international news and updates, stay tuned to NewsX World.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Greenland, long seen as a remote Arctic territory, is now at the centre of intensifying great power competition. From US President Donald Trump's claims of American sovereignty over military bases to NATO's role in the Arctic and Denmark's authority over Greenland's future. Questions of power, control and self-determination are taking on new urgency as the United States, China and Russia eye strategic advantage in the Arctic. The Greenlanders are increasingly pushing back against any notion of foreign control over their land. To discuss this ongoing situation, joining us now is Tilly Marty-Nielsen, a former Member of Parliament from Greenland. She's based in the capital of Nuuk and has been a prominent voice on Greenlandic sovereignty, self-governance and the political and psychological impact of great power pressure on small nations. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to talk to you here on NewsX World. Let's get straight into this. And of course, Trump says the US will gain sovereignty over areas in Greenland where American military bases are located. If the United States gains this sovereignty over those base areas, doesn't that mean Greenland's territory is already being partially surrendered, even without a formal sale?
Yes, I mean, Greenlanders are not happy about that proposal at all. I don't think that is something that's on the table. I think it's something that Donald Trump himself has said that he wants in the framework that he was talking about. And by the way, after Davos, both the Danish Prime Minister and our Greenlandic Prime Minister were shaking their heads and telling the people here in Greenland, we haven't made any sort of framework as what he's referring to right now. So we're not sure what he's talking about. And Mark Rutte also came out afterwards and said, look, I have no jurisdiction. I can negotiate on behalf of the Kingdom of Denmark or on Greenland. So it might just be something that Donald Trump says. Frankly, in Greenland, we do not trust anything that he says. So we're going to have to wait and see. But I don't think any Greenlanders want to give up any country at all. It's not a nation, the United States, that has been very good with the nature. They're very bad at pollution. The bases that they have had here, they have had 17 in Greenland, and now they have pulled it back to only one. It's by their own choosing. They have been left with a lot of pollution on the ground and with a lot of trash everywhere, a lot of machines and oil cans and diesel and stuff like that left behind. So first of all, you're not able to, by Greenlandic law, own land in Greenland at all. Second of all, nobody of the common Greenlanders, at least, would want the United States to own any land in Greenland. It's our land.
And Tilly, what began as Trump floating the idea of quote-unquote buying Greenland is now evolving into claims of US sovereign control over specific sites. Was Trump's original idea ever a joke, or was it always the opening move of a longer strategy to expand US control step by step?
We are thinking here that what he wants to do is to line his own pockets and the pockets of his benefactors who have supported his presidential campaigns to pay them off with Greenlandic minerals and riches. That is what we're thinking right here. We also think that the whole invasion and harsh language is partially, of course, true, but also a deterrent from the Epstein files that Mr. Trump does not want to release at all, and is delaying in the United States, in his own country. We think that he maybe wants to run a third term, and or that he wants to make sure that he's paying back his donors and his own family, making them rich by exploiting Greenland and the Greenlandic underground. So it's not about security. It's not about anything noble. It's not about protecting his own people in any way. I can't believe that a lot of people on social media are buying what he's saying. It's not true. If he wanted to, with the treaty that Denmark, Greenland, and the United States has made in 1951 and amended in 1996 and 2004, I might say, he could already have done basically anything that he wanted to security-wise, as long as we would have nodded along, and we usually do. So it's not about security. He knows that, his administration knows that, the Greenlandic people knows that. I don't think that he was counting on everyone in 2026 not being fond members of Neo-Colonizer Club, I mean, he is speaking like it's 1726. I don't even know what he's going on about, but nobody in Greenland wants a neo-colonizer. Nobody wants to line the pockets of Mr. Trump, his family, and his closest friends. We do know, everyone, how close ties that some of his people in his administration, as well as some of his close friends, as well as some of his donors to his presidential campaign, has to mining, has to rare earths productions, and the consumerism that they need to make sure that they can control and carry on for them to be rich still. To Greenlanders, this is very despicable, very dishonorable, and we're a people. We're not just a piece of ice. We're a land. We're not a piece of ice. We're very angry about that, and we think it's about being wealthy, and it will only benefit Mr. Trump and his closest friends in America.
And Denmark has constitutional responsibility for Greenland's foreign and defence policy, yet Washington appears to be setting its own terms. If Denmark cannot prevent an ally from asserting sovereignty on Greenlandic soil, what does that say about how much authority Copenhagen truly has over Greenland's future?
Well, what we're seeing right now is that Denmark is working fiercely hard for us, and they're not doing anything without asking us. We have agreed saying that nothing about Greenland without Greenland, and they have adhered to that to us. So they're making amends for the times that they were colonizers, very much so. Second of all, Denmark has invoked all of the NATO members, and Canada and all of Europe has come to our aid. They just froze a trade agreement with the United States and then unfroze it when he stopped talking about military invasion. But they did. They put out their big economic instruments. They have put soldiers on the ground. I know that the talk around the world is that there were only 40 soldiers here. We have seen significant amounts of troops. We have seen significant amounts of equipment, military equipment. We have seen both air and sea defense, very expensive air and sea defense, I might add, from all of the NATO countries, except for the United States. They did have NORAD sent up here. So they're not, surprisingly, America has not been able to threaten us and keep threatening us the way that they have. And I think that's a testimony to actually Europe and especially Denmark that we are so fond of now, knowing that this is 2026 and we cannot be neo-colonizers and we have to stand by our words and our treaties, and they are.
And the US president has threatened NATO-linked tariffs against European allies like the United Kingdom, Denmark, France, Germany, before backing off after these vague talks. Is NATO security still a shield for Greenland, or has it become a pressure tool Washington uses to bend smaller allies?
No, NATO has turned out to be surprising to us as well, actually our protective shield for Greenland. They have turned up and is pledging to do what's right, along with Canada and a lot of other nations. Donald Trump has not only threatened Greenland, he has threatened a lot of other nations too. He's putting tariffs left and right without any means or reason. I know that India has also suffered under this. And what we have heard Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, say on Davos, the World Economic Forum, is that we're going to have to go case by case and do it principled, but also pragmatically. And I think that's the new world order we're looking at. If Donald Trump is not being careful, he will dismantle the United States eventually as a superpower, because when you're allies, you're going to have to trust them. When you're trade partners, you're going to have to trust them until we make a new deal, right? And he didn't. He just went out and went ballistic on almost all of the countries that they had as allies and as trade friends, including India, I know, but also Greenland and Denmark and Europe. And he has not won in this case. He tries to kind of take over the narrative and say that it's been strong and it worked and blah, blah, blah, but it didn't actually.
Greenland has long debated independence from Denmark. I think a recent poll was the vast majority of Greenlanders do eventually want independence. Does Trump's pressure make this more necessary than ever or more risky than ever?
We have been talking about independence. It's not a natural for people to want to be independent in the country. However, if you ask the common Greenlander, between 57% and 75% wants to be independent. If you ask the common Greenlander when, you will get a wider range of answers. There are only around 15% that wants to be independent, like fast, within their own lifetime. The rest of them, whenever we're ready to do it, which could be 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now. I've always been a unionist because I don't believe it will happen in my lifetime, or if it did, that we would be invaded by some other superpower somewhere, because we do have riches and we do have a strategic placement right next to the Northeast Passage, right? So I have always been batting for we're not able to do this, and I have to say that Donald Trump has all of a sudden made all of my points very valid. We just didn't think that the superpower I was talking about would be the United States. But this is the world as it is right now, so we're getting closer together with Denmark. We're being pushed closer together with the allies of NATO and of all of Europe and Canada. He's doing the exact opposite of what he wanted to, because now every single Greenlandic person knows if we were independent tomorrow, US would invade us and they wouldn't have any problems with NATO and Europe, right? We are a very well-educated and well-adversed people in news of the world. And I don't think that he was counting on that. I also don't think that he was counting on Denmark being so fiercely protective of Greenland, and Greenland wasn't either, so we're very, very happy with Denmark.
And Greenland now sits at the centre of US, China, Russia strategic competition. In today's great power rivalry, can Greenland realistically remain a self-governing people, or is it being pushed towards becoming a permanent strategic asset of someone else's empire?
Well, what we're seeing right now is that China has been out and denouncing Donald Trump and saying, look, we're not threatening Greenland. We would love to do commerce, but we're not threatening Greenland. Russia will, of course, always be a threat, seeing as how they are being aggressive in Ukraine and has invaded those people. And the United States apparently is a clear and present threat right now, which is completely crazy. However, I don't think that any of the superpowers, because Europe and Canada and those nations has never had to awaken in the great force that they have. But you have to remember there's a strong legacy in England, in France, in Australia, in all of the allies in NATO, remembering World War II, that they had to declare war because Hitler invaded Poland back then. And this is actually kind of the same situation that we're in right now, and they remember. So most of the countries has been saying, or diplomatically in a way saying, look, we are going to stand together. There's 27 countries in the European nation, and it is, I can't remember how many we are in NATO, and all of those countries are rich. They have a much more powerful military than has been conveyed by Mr. Trump or by anyone else. They are well educated and they are well adversed actually also in fighting. And you also have to remember we're fighting in an Arctic climate. For example, the US military has around 10,000 soldiers skilled in fighting in Arctic conditions. Finland alone has 35,000. There's a lot of things there that we could talk about militarily. Of course, I'm no expert, but I am being helped by people from all around the world, I have to say. From the United Arab Emirates to India to Canada to, even we have had North Koreans up here reporting. That's wild. We are seeing and getting help from a lot of around the world. And politically, I would have to say the European Union and NATO has stepped up big time for us. So has Canada. It has been quite amazing. So I think the self-understanding of the European Union as well as NATO now is growing, and they're not going to back down. They're not going to surrender, because if Greenland falls, then who's next?
Thank you very much, Tilly Martinussen, for joining us here on Focal Length. It was a pleasure to get your insights on the programme. But with that, it is a wrap on this episode of Focal Length. For more international news and updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Through a post on Truth Social, US President Donald Trump announces the deployment of border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota while attacking Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Federal officials are standing firm on their account of the Minneapolis shooting as video evidence appears to contradict key elements of their narrative. The case has intensified political scrutiny, public anger, and renewed debate over federal law enforcement accountability in the US. The Israeli military confirms that it has recovered the remains of Israeli police officer Ran Julie, the last hostage held in Gaza. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney likely to visit India in early March as Ottawa steps up efforts to diversify trade away from the United States. Focus remains on agreements on uranium, energy, critical minerals, AI, and quantum computing. The Kremlin said the US trilateral talks in the United Arab Emirates between Russian and Ukrainian negotiators had been held in a constructive spirit, but that there was still significant work ahead to be done. Philippines authorities are searching for survivors after a passenger ferry sinks in southern waters, leaving at least 18 dead and many still missing. European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen warns that Europe will not tolerate online abuses against women and children as the bloc opens a probe against AI chatbots Grok. A private jet carrying 8 crashed in flames as it was taking off from Mene Airport with 8 aboard, but their fate and identifiers were not known immediately. Protesters gather in Minneapolis to demand federal immigration agents leave after a 37-year-old man is fatally shot by Border Patrol, intensifying local outrage. Governor Tim Walz calls on President Trump to withdraw the agents as demonstrations and political tension grow over the incident. All right, viewers, let's start with some news now coming in from Israel, where the military has confirmed that it had recovered the remains of Israeli police officer Ran Julie, marking the return of the last hostage body held in Gaza. This development fulfills a key condition of US President Donald Trump's plan to end the Gaza war. Julie was on sick leave when the Hamas-led attack on Israeli border communities began on October 7. In 2023, escalating into a 2-year-long war. He rushed to the southern border to assist but was killed in battle. His body was taken hostage by Hamas from the area of Kibbutz Alumin, Israel's military reported. Now, with the return of all hostages, both living and deceased, Israel marks a significant step in the ongoing conflict. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also announced that the army has found and identified the body of the last remaining hostage in Gaza. Let's listen into his statement.
אני שמח לבשר לאזרחי ישראל, לעם ישראל, כפי שבישרתי עכשיו, משפחת גמילי, כוחותינו מצאו את רני. הוא כרגע בדרך הביתה. זה הישג בלתי רגיל של מדינת ישראל. הבטחנו, אני הבטחנו, להחזיר את כולם. החזרנו את כולם. עד האחרון שבו. רני, גיבור ישראל, נכנס ראשון, יצא האחרון, שב הבית.
All right, joining me now is John Rossomando, President of Viking Research Associates and geopolitical analyst from Washington, D.C. John, thanks very much for joining me. The stage is now, of course, clear for the second phase of the ceasefire in Gaza. Do you think it's a credit to Trump's diplomacy?
Well, I think it's absolutely thanks to President Trump's ability to bring the different factions together to get the ceasefire in the first place. But I think that going ahead is probably going to be a little bit more challenging because of Hamas's refusal to disarm.
All right. What do you think are really needs to be done now as far as the disarmament of Hamas is concerned, and also the tunnels, the underground tunnels that they are using, their destruction is concerned?
Well, I think that the tunnels under Gaza City and throughout the territory need to be destroyed. I mean, the plans for them should be handed over to to the Board of Peace, and then demolished by U.S. or other sappers, because the reason we had the death toll was Israel was trying to destroy those tunnels, but it wasn't entirely successful.
Right. What are now your opinion of the Board of Peace? Of course, Cambodia was the latest country to join. I believe 35 countries are on board as signatories. But what's noticeable is the absence of some of the mighty nations, China, Russia, India, and the other P5 members of the UN Security Council, of course, except US.
Well, I think that these are all countries that President Trump thinks should be on there. I think as far as China and Russia, they're allies of Hamas. But then President Trump put Qatar and Turkey on the Board of Peace, which has really angered the Israelis. So I just think that it remains to be seen if this Board of Peace will accomplish anything.
All right, John, do continue to stay on with me, and I thank you for your comments there. Moving ahead, viewers, let's also tell you that Israel's Supreme Court has held a hearing for a petition filed by the Foreign Press Association, an organization representing international media outlets in Israel and the Palestinian territories, demanding independent access for journalists in Gaza. Let's in fact first listen into some statements coming out of that hearing.
We submitted this petition in September 2024, and ever since we've been fighting for journalists to be allowed into Gaza. So today was a very important day for us, and we trust the court to make a decision and to allow journalists to enter Gaza independently.
We were happy with today's hearing. The judges listened, they asked good questions, and we had a chance to state our case. And we are hopeful and we are optimistic that they are going to rule and do the right thing and allow journalists into Gaza to do our work.
So I think it was a decisive hearing for this litigation that has been dragging on. There had been 9 postponements and additional delays, and I think we may come to the end of this because obviously the decision of the IDF to forbid the international press in Gaza is not understandable by international standards of a free press, but also because of the evolution of the...
Request John to join us back in the discussion here. John, even if the journalists are given access to the region, can their security and safety really be assured? Because we've already heard reports of a large number of journalists being killed in the war zone.
Well, I mean, we want to talk about so-called journalists, the ones who have been killed by the Israelis, who are actually spies for hostile powers like Qatar or even members of Hamas. I think that one of the things that we've had in the past, I don't know what it would be now, has been that what the journalists have been allowed to cover in Gaza has been censored and controlled by Hamas. which Israel believes will result in more propaganda against it. And I think that we'll see what the court decides.
Right, John, thanks then very much for joining me in this conversation. And we now move ahead, viewers. Let's cover some news from Germany now coming in. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadefull is urging Europe and NATO to increase pressure on Russia to end the war in Ukraine. He called for a two-track strategy, raising the costs for Moscow while stepping up political, financial and military support for Ukraine. Wadefull accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of creating a humanitarian crisis by targeting civilian energy infrastructure during winter to break Ukrainian resistance. Let's listen in to what the German Foreign Minister has said.
Es ist gut und wichtig, dass Präsident Trump es sich zum Ziel gemacht hat, das Sterben in der Ukraine zu beenden. Das Treffen in Alaska hat verdeutlicht, für einen gerechten und dauerhaften Frieden muss Moskau sich endlich bewegen. Bis das nicht passiert, muss der Druck auf Russland erhöht werden, auch mit verstärkten Ukraine-Hilfen. Dass auch Japan die Ukraine bislang mit 12 Milliarden $ unterstützt hat und Sanktionen gegen Russland durchsetzt, dafür bin ich sehr dankbar.
All right, joining me now is Alison Matler, former AP Bureau Chief from Bucharest. She joins us in this conversation. Alison, thanks very much for joining me. What are your first comments?
Well, I mean, Germany, before this war began in 2022, was very heavily reliant on Russia for gas. But it has changed its alliance. We now have a new chancellor, or relatively new chancellor, Merz, and they've become one of Ukraine's strongest allies in Europe. And that's important because Germany is the lead economy in Europe. It's an engine of the European Union, and it's very important for strategic defense, being a member of NATO as well. And Germany wants to support, is behind the effort, or is leading one of the leaders of the effort to support, give military and security and humanitarian support to Ukraine. But also the German foreign minister is, let's say, irritated with Russia from these talks in the United Arab Emirates, because Russia will not budge, basically Vladimir Putin, on the territorial demands they're making of Ukraine.
Right. Do you think a conclusion can be arrived upon as far as territories are concerned, particularly Donbass, that Ukraine, of course, does not want to cede, and Russia wouldn't stop without having?
I would like to give you a different answer because, I'm a journalist, but, I'm a human being, and we'd like to see progress in these talks, and most normal people would like to see an end to the war. But I don't see, since the beginning of any peace talks, Russia has stuck to its maximalist demands, and it wants territory as not conquered or captured. And Ukraine, it will cede on other matters, or it will make some compromises, but it doesn't see why Russia should be given territory that it has not taken, that it has not seized during its military operations there. So, and I think the German foreign minister said this as well. I don't see any progress being made, and I don't see the two sides agreeing. And this seems to be the sticking point. They probably could agree on other points, but on the territory issue, they seem to have hit a brick wall.
Right, Alison. Well, let's watch out how those trilateral talks go, and if any conclusion can really be arrived upon. It's the first time that the three parties and Russia and Ukraine are sitting together. But moving ahead, viewers, let's also tell you that Russian President Vladimir Putin has welcomed Malaysia Supreme Ruler Sultan Ibrahim during a private visit to Russia. The two leaders met at the State Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, greeting each other with a handshake. President Putin then invited Sultan Ibrahim on a brief tour of the museum's 20-column hall, where director Mikhail Piotrowski highlighted key treasures. The Kremlin says the visit will be followed by a private meeting between the two leaders. The engagement reflects ongoing diplomatic contact between Russia and Malaysia during Sultan Ibrahim's stay in the country. And now moving ahead, viewers, let's also tell you that Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has downplayed US President Donald Trump's latest threat to impose 100% tariffs on Canadian goods. That's in fact breaking news updates we are bringing you. Carney has suggested that the remarks should be seen in the context of the upcoming trade deal review, as the North American Free Trade Agreement is set for renegotiation this year. Trump's comments come after Canada moved forward with a potential trade deal with China. Carney acknowledged the importance of the trade negotiations but emphasized that the president's statements were likely part of his strong negotiating strategy. Carney reassured reporters that these remarks should be misunderstood and should not be misunderstood as positioning for future talks rather than immediate action. And moving ahead to news from Europe, Italy's Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani is urging the European Union to designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terrorist organization after Tehran's deadly crackdown on nationwide protests. Tajani says the civilian toll demands a strong response and plans to raise the proposal at an European Union foreign ministers meeting in Brussels this week. Rise groups estimate nearly 6,000 people may have been killed, while Iran's official figure is far lower. The European Union has already sanctioned Iranian officials and restricted exports linked to drone and missile production, but listing the IRGC would require unanimous approval. The push comes as regional tension rises. Meanwhile, the UAE says it will not allow its airspace or territory to be used for any military action against Iran, reaffirming its neutrality amid concerns of possible US action. Alison requested to join us back in this discussion. Firstly, how do you, what is really your estimate of the death toll from the crackdown on protesters in Iran? Because of course, different rights groups are coming up with different figures, whether in Iran or in the US. But Iran's official toll, I believe, is around or more than 5,000. What is it that you are picking up from, while you're at Bucharest?
What I'm picking up is a wide range of estimates. I'm also picking up, it's very hard to say at the moment how many have been killed because of a lack of communication, lack of internet. I understand that Iran has run out of body bags. It's very unclear. There were apparently 2 days last week and there were a load of killings. I've seen estimates actually up to 30,000, which would be absolutely massive. So I think at the moment we don't really know the full scale of the killings that have happened, but I suspect they're going to be higher and higher. Most organizations, respectable organizations, international organizations, downplay the figures until they are certain that the higher figures can be verified. So I think we're going to be seeing many, many thousands. I don't know whether it will be 30,000. I don't know whether we will ever know, because a lot of these bodies were just buried and we won't know necessarily. But what is worrying is the vast discrepancy between what Iran says, what some human rights organizations say, and then what other organizations say, and also the difficulty in accessing the true figure. And I think probably the true figure will never be known. We will have estimates at the end when this episode is over, but not at the moment. But it's feared that it's much higher than what the sort of aid agencies or are saying at the moment.
Right, and the de-escalation, the calm that we are seeing right now, do you think it's really the calm before the storm as far as action on Iran is concerned by the US or allies?
It looked like, first of all, some days ago, well, maybe last week, it looked like, or the week before, it looked like Donald Trump was ready to strike. And then the next day he said the killing had stopped and there was nothing. So now we're in a sort of limbo where we don't know. So it is possible, I understand, Iranian diplomat in Geneva today said we could expect a US strike, and then added they had no intelligence, they had no official information there would be one. But we do know that Donald Trump does function on being unpredictable, and that is one of his assets, if you like, one of his weapons, his modus operandi. So, you know, at this moment, what the information we have, it doesn't look like the US is poised to strike, but I don't think it can be ruled out either. It also depends what is happening inside Iran as well, whether the authorities continue to kill the civilians.
All right, Alison, thanks then for joining me in this discussion. And now, viewers, we move ahead to cover news on the snowstorms hitting the west. Now, a powerful snowstorm and extreme cold have disrupted daily life across much of Canada as well. Environment Canada has issued orange alerts in several regions, warning of rare and severe weather. Heavy snow and strong winds have reduced visibility, triggered dozens of traffic accidents and caused power outages. More than 10,000 homes have lost electricity in parts of Quebec, with outages also reported in Newfoundland. Travel has been heavily affected, especially at Toronto Pearson Airport, where most flights were cancelled or delayed. Local authorities in cities including Ottawa and Toronto have imposed winter parking bans as crews work to clear roads. Now, moving ahead, WhatsApp has officially been classified as a very large online platform under the European Union's Digital Services Act, a designation that will subject the messaging services to heightened regulatory scrutiny. With more than 51 million monthly users in the European Union, WhatsApp now faces stricter obligations aimed at protecting its users, particularly vulnerable groups like younger audiences. As a VLOP, WhatsApp is required to take proactive measures to combat disinformation and prevent the manipulation of public opinion. Additionally, the platform must safeguard users' mental health. The European Commission will closely monitor WhatsApp's compliance with these rules, and failure to adhere to the DSA's requirements could result in fines of up to 6% of the platform's global annual turnover. WhatsApp has until mid-May to align it with these new regulations. Other platforms classified as VLOPs, including Meta-owned Instagram and Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Snapchat. Viewers, that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For all international news and updates.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. US President Donald Trump says his administration is reviewing the fatal shooting of US citizen Alex Pretty by immigration agents in Minneapolis and signals agents may withdraw. The administration says Pretty brandished a gun as protests grow in the city. Israel says it is conducting a large-scale operation in Gaza to locate the last hostage as mediators press for progress on the next ceasefire phase. The move comes as Israel's cabinet weighs opening the Rafah crossing with Egypt. Houthi rebels threaten to attack Red Sea shipping as a US aircraft carrier group moves into the region. The warning follows President Trump's threat of possible action against Iran. At least 18 people die after a ferry carrying more than 350 passengers and crew sinks off the southern Philippines. Authorities say 317 people are rescued and at least 24 remain missing. China's President Xi Jinping calls India a good neighbour, friend and partner in a Republic Day message. Xi says bilateral ties are improving and important for global peace and prosperity. At least 104 political prisoners are released from jails across Venezuela, rights groups say. Foro Penal says the release process is continuing and more freedoms are expected. A massive storm leaves over 1 million households without power and forces more than 10,000 flight cancellations across the US. Officials warn of life-threatening conditions from Texas to New England as at least 3 storm-related deaths are reported. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says a US security guarantees document for Ukraine is 100% ready after talks with Washington and Moscow. Kyiv now awaits a signing date as Zelensky renews his push for EU membership by 2027. Those are the top headlines for the hour. And first we turn to South Asia. And global leaders are extending greetings to India on its 77th Republic Day, highlighting strong partnerships, democratic values and cooperation across regions. The United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio congratulated India on its Republic Day, saying cooperation between the two countries delivers real results in defence, energy and emerging sectors. The French embassy in India also extended greetings on X, recalling France's role as chief guest in 2024. China's President Xi Jinping said China and India are good neighbours, friends and partners, as he sent Republic Day greetings to President Draupadi Murmu. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amasarya also extended Republic Day greetings to the people of India. Turning to New Delhi now, and European Union leaders attended India's Republic Day parade as the guests of honour, a day before the much-anticipated EU-India summit. The parade showcased military bands, horse and camel cavalry and India's latest military hardware, including air defence systems. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the occasion, highlighting India's collective resolve for progress. European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen are in New Delhi ahead of a likely trade agreement announcement. This follows years of negotiations and intensified efforts after US trade tariffs. The deal would be a major step for both sides, boosting trade and security ties. We turn now to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and the Kremlin says this weekend's trilateral talks in Abu Dhabi with Ukraine and the United States took place in a constructive spirit, but stressed there's still significant work ahead. This comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the US security guarantees for Ukraine 100% ready and says Kyiv is waiting for partners to set a signing date. Zelensky highlighted Ukraine's push for EU membership by 2027, calling it an economic security guarantee. He described the Abu Dhabi talks as the first in a long time to include both diplomats and military representatives, and he also reaffirmed that Ukraine will not compromise on its territorial integrity. Meanwhile, Russia insists that any deal must include Kyiv ceding all of the Donbass, which Moscow currently controls 90% of. Negotiators will return to the UAE for the next round of talks on February the 1st. Discussions will cover military, economic issues and the future of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Joining us now is Dr. Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russia affairs expert. He joins us live from Brussels. Thank you very much for joining us, Gilbert, here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, we have seen now Zelensky's statements that this security guarantees document is now officially done. What exactly are you expecting from it? Something Article 5 like, or something completely different?
Well, what Mr. Zelensky has said is incomplete and also in part contradicts entirely the way the negotiations are going. Then he says that there will be no sacrifice of property is utterly false. The whole, the essence of the military and security discussions that went on between Russia's head of military intelligence and other representatives with their counterparts from Ukraine were, to my understanding, about exactly that. They were about the provisions, the conditions under which Ukraine will withdraw its forces from Donbass as required by the Russians in order to begin or to finalize peace negotiations.
Okay, so do you have hopes
Yes.
coming into these February the 1st talks, given that the first round showed no real breakthrough?
Well, my personal hopes are not relevant. The Russians have hopes. And I'd like to call attention to public sources, open sources that my colleagues, both in mainstream and in alternative media, do not properly make use of. The fact is that last night's program, News of the Week, this Viesti Nedeli program that is hosted by Dmitry Kiselyov, who happens also to be the head of all Russian state television news reporting on the various channels, Mr. Kiselyov presented information which is highly relevant to our discussion. Firstly, that, as what I just said, that this discussion on security is about withdrawal of Ukrainian troops. Secondly, that there have been two parallel sets of negotiations going on. One is the trilateral talks that you have referred to, and the second is bilateral U.S.-Russian talks, which, to my knowledge, will be resuming tomorrow or sometime in the week, and are not waiting for the weekend gathering of the trilateral on Saturday. Those bilateral talks are about restoring normal state-to-state relations between Russia and the United States. And part of that was covered by the presence of Mr. Grünberg, who has been appointed by Trump to be in charge of the financial side of the Peace Board, or Board of Peace. That is to secure the funds to make it operative. And he was there because Mr. Putin was explaining that Russia will contribute, wants to take part in the Board of Peace, and its $1 billion contribution, which is mandatory to be a permanent member, should come from frozen Russian state assets in the United States, of which there are a total of $5 billion. Also, very relevant to our discussion, Mr. Putin had a side meeting on the same day with Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian state, in which he clearly was discussing Russia's contribution of the $1 billion, and also that the remaining $4 billion of Russian assets in the United States should be considered for transfer to the reconstruction of Gaza. That is quite remarkable, and it bears on the Ukrainian situation, because everyone's asking where's the $800 billion in America's offer to settle the war in Ukraine. Where's it coming from? I think it's highly likely $300 billion will be coming from frozen Russian assets in Europe.
Gilbert, of course, let's move back to the talks which are going to go on. They still, both sides, maintain the same stance. Russia says Ukraine has to cede the entire Donbass, which Moscow doesn't control the entirety of. And Zelensky says that Ukraine must uphold its territorial integrity. Is there any point in moving forward with these talks, given that both of these objectives remain completely unchanged, and neither of which have shown any sign of changing these objectives?
Well, Mr. Zelensky is simply lying to everybody. Of course they've changed. The Russians wouldn't be meeting if they hadn't changed. There would be no tripartite talks. There would be no separate talks between Russia and the United States about restoring normal relations if what Mr. Zelensky said were true. It's not true. It's a perfect lie, as most everything that he always says. So let's get things straight. The Russians are very satisfied. This was clear from Russian television last night. The Kremlin is very satisfied with the way the discussions are going, and that can only be true if they're getting what they want. They also say that Mr. Trump is rushing things. He wants this done very quickly. And we can give a very simple reason. If we wait a few weeks or a few months, Russians will control the whole of Donbass, and there'll be nothing to negotiate with Ukraine other than its capitulation. So the Ukrainians now have a certain leverage in the talks because the Russians haven't taken all the territory. And this is why Mr. Trump is rushing the talks.
That's interesting. Well, of course, Gilbert, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. Of course, we'll bring you all the updates on February the 1st, apologies, when that trilateral meeting converges once again. But we move on now, and Russian oil companies say they are continuing to operate inside Venezuela despite global tensions and shifting leadership in Caracas. Moscow's ambassador to Venezuela, Sergei Merik Bashkadarov, says Russian firms have been working in the oil industry and are still working and will continue to work there. He stressed that these companies will fulfill their contracts no matter what decisions Venezuelan leaders make. Melik Bashkadarov have also points out that Russia and Venezuela extract oil together, but Venezuelan authorities control how the oil is sold on the global market. This comes amid broader geopolitical friction over energy exports, which the United States is pressing hard on sanctions and Western nations to keen to limit the Russian influence in the region. Gilbert Doctorow joins us once again. What does this mean for the future of Russian oil in Venezuela? Of course, the roadmap isn't exactly clear when it comes to Donald Trump saying that the United States is going to run Venezuela, especially with Delcy Rodriguez still in place at the head of government. How do you think this situation is going to develop, and what does it mean for Venezuela, Russian oil operations inside the country?
Well, I don't want to leave the impression from our previous couple minutes of talk that the Ukrainians are the only ones who know how to lie. The Russians also are not bunny rabbits, and they also know how to lie. Or shall we say, to paint the picture different from reality. What the Russian ambassador is saying is true for the next couple of weeks. It certainly isn't true for the long term. The United States has pushed Russian oil companies like Lukoil out of production projects in the Middle East. So why would the United States tolerate Russia's continued operation in oil extraction in Venezuela, which the United States wants to have as its own hunting grounds, privileged hunting grounds, without any European or outside actors. So Russian participation in oil extraction that's ongoing now will be shut down within the foreseeable future, whatever the ambassador happens to say.
And what does it say for the future of Venezuela? Of course, Russia and Venezuela, close allies prior to Nicolas Maduro's capture. As I've said previously, we don't know the roadmap ahead for the country, but what do you think is going to be Moscow's approach going forward in dealing with now a possible US-controlled Venezuela?
Russia will back down. Russia will leave the area without too many regrets. Look, the arrangements with Venezuela, just like the arrangements with Cuba, are of long standing. They have their own past, and the past goes back to a technological age which we no longer observe. By that I mean the military capabilities of Russia have now made it unnecessary for them to hold allies in the Western Hemisphere. They can have an excellent deterrence against the United States by frigates, by submarines, and even by merchant vessels, which are carrying in container boxes hypersonic missiles that can destroy Washington in 5 minutes' time. So the Russians have no real need for military cooperation with any of the countries in Latin America. This is just simply respect for their past presence, but it doesn't tell you where the future is going. And the future is going where Mr. Trump wants it, with the United States exercising hegemony, exclusive hegemony, over its hemisphere. Now, what the Russians can do is to get their own piece of flesh in this, and to have America acquiesce in Russian domination of its own so-called near abroad, of its own sphere of influence, and China the same thing. So that is how the Russians will get what they want out of the unpleasant reality in Western Hemisphere that Mr. Trump has put in place.
What are the worst case scenarios for Western energy security if Russia does maintain strategic footholds like it has done in Venezuela in these sanctioned oil markets?
It won't. The United States, by taking control of Venezuela, will have an important control over 35% of all global oil trading. That makes it a very powerful competitor to OPEC. This is the logic behind it all. And to think that Russia will be allowed to continue to participate there is folly. It's not going to happen.
Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on and over to the Indo-Pacific, and the Philippine Foreign Ministry has said that Philippines has made firm representations to China's embassy in its ambassador in Manila over what it described as an escalation of public exchanges between China and Filipino officials over the disputes in the South China Sea. The Chinese embassy and officials in Manila have stepped up their rhetoric in recent weeks, with the criticizing of the Philippines' Coast Guard spokesperson and its lawmakers. The Philippines' Foreign Ministry Affairs Secretary Teresa Lazaro has said that differences between states are best handled through diplomacy and not public exchanges. Gautam Mukherjee joins us here on this issue, and he's a senior journalist joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Gautam, for joining us here on NewsX World. What more can you tell us about this dispute concerning the Philippines and the broader Indo-Pacific?
Well, I think it's an ongoing amount of tension between the Philippines and China. America is backing the Philippines, and there have been reports that they may revive Subic Bay and establish a large presence in the Philippines once again. In the meantime, China is constantly needling the Philippines because of its opposition to total Chinese hegemony over the South China Sea. So lodging of protests and so on is par for the course. Whether this will flare up into anything bigger than that is doubtful, but the Chinese are not comfortable with the Philippines being more bellicose than many of the others in the littoral, and the fact that they are inviting and cooperating with American designs.
And of course, how much of China's messaging is directly really aimed at Washington rather than Manila?
I don't think China likes to directly aim at Washington because they have a lot at stake with the United States, just as the United States has a lot at stake with China. So proxies are more comfortable to make your message carried, and I think that's what if they're sniping at the Philippines, it's indirectly telling America that we're not happy with your support for the Philippines against us. But having said that, I don't think they are aiming at Washington directly.
And are we seeing kind of grey zone pressure move to more open diplomatic confrontation in this situation?
I don't think it's exactly confrontation. There may be some exchanges diplomatically, but unlikely for any of this to flare up into anything more. The Philippines is arming itself. It has also bought a lot of BrahMos missiles from India, and I think it's placing a second order. It is aiming to defend itself in the event of any escalation militarily from China. China knows it and is unlikely to go there.
Do you think this episode tests the credibility of the US-Philippine mutual defense treaty, and how strong is that treaty today, given all the altercations, particularly around the Scarborough Shoal and other contested areas in the Indo-Pacific?
I think it's building up. The Philippine-US defense cooperation is building up. It isn't at fighting pitch yet, but it is certainly heading that way, and all of it is a caution to China so that it doesn't proceed with its idea of taking over the South China Sea in toto, because that will not go down well, not just with the Philippines, but a number of other countries in the region, the United States, the so-called rule-based order, so-called international law of the seas. Though nowadays with Trump behaving the way he is, international law itself is undergoing some changes.
Indeed. Gautam Mukherjee, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Well, that is all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news and updates. Thank you.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union.
Hello and welcome. You're watching the newsroom. I'm Kriti Mehta. Now, in this show, we are going to give you a roundup of all the top stories that took place today across the world. But to start with, there is some breaking news now coming in fact, from Israel, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a stark warning to Iran. Netanyahu is saying an Iranian attack on Israel will be one mistake too many. That's breaking news details that are coming in. Any attempt by Iran to harm Israel will be met by a determined response. Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has issued a stark warning, and he was speaking at the Knesset session honoring Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama, where he made this statement to say that it will be a very big mistake, one mistake too many. Netanyahu says there will be more normalizations deals, meanwhile, with Arab and Muslim states. Alright, viewers, Israel issuing a stark warning now to Iran for any military aggression, deterring it, saying the mistake will be a big one. And with that, we are now going to move on. Alright, viewers, and let's now move on to the next story. Now, as far as the ceasefire in Gaza is concerned, there's a crucial development that's taken place today. The body of the last remaining captives has now been returned by Hamas to Israel. That's a big development that is coming in today. Israel has retrieved the last hostages' body from Gaza, paving the way for crossing to open. Israel said it would now reopen Rafah crossing once a search is completed, and the return of remains of the last hostage's body is anticipated as a moment of national healing. Now, Hamas is saying the discovery of the remains shows its commitment to end the war. Israel has recovered now the remains of the last remaining hostage held in Gaza. It is confirmed by the Israeli military, and this, of course, is fulfilling a key condition of the initial phase of Donald Trump's plan to end the war in the Palestinian territory. In the latest, the remains of police officer Ranj Willi, was held in Gaza for more than 840 days, have been identified and will be returned now for burial. The military has made this statement, and this is, of course, now clearing the way for the second round of a ceasefire to be implemented. The recovery of the remains could pave the way for a limited reopening of the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt, the devastated enclave's main gateway to the outside world, in line with the Israeli pledges. The Palestinian Committee of Technocrats has it's been backed by the US to administer Gaza. It said that the border crossing would open this week, and a government spokesperson has also said that no immediate comment was made when asked about the border crossing and its reopening. Meanwhile, the last remaining hostage and his remains had been held in Gaza since he was killed during Hamas's attack on October 7 in 2023, when the Palestinian militant group led an attack on southern Israeli communities, triggering the 2-year Israeli offensive. Footage aired on Israeli news channels showed dozens of soldiers, arm in arm, purportedly at the site in Gaza where the body was discovered, singing a Hebrew song expressing Jewish hope and faith. Meanwhile, there are some statements that are coming in. Let's hear.
אני שמח לבשר לאזרחי ישראל, לעם ישראל, כפי שבישרתי עכשיו, משפחת גבילי, כוחותינו מצאו את רני. הוא כרגע בדרך הביתה. זה הישג בלתי רגיל של מדינת ישראל. הבטחנו, אני הבטחנו, להחזיר את כולם. החזרנו את כולם, עד האחרון שבו. רני, גיבור ישראל, נכנס ראשון, יצא האחרון, שב הביתה.
All right, joining me now in this discussion is my colleague Marisha Barve. Marisha, what more are you picking up and what do we see next as far as the ceasefire in Gaza is concerned, especially after the constitution of the Board of Peace?
Yes, well, Kriti, thank you for having me. Today, which is the 26th of January 2026, marks a rather momentous day for Israel as the remains, as you mentioned, the remains of the last hostage has been returned back to Israel. These remains are of a 24-year-old officer who served for the army, for the Jewish army, has been returned. He also was a police officer. He was, like you mentioned, killed in the October 7, 2023 attack, which was led by Hamas. And finally, his remains have reached back to Israel. The Jewish community, the citizens of Israel, do celebrate the return. This also marks the completion or the final stage of the first phase of the US brokered ceasefire and peace deal between both Israel and Gaza. Now, his remains, that is the remains of the 24-year-old police officer, Ran Gvili. His remains were found after an operation by the Israeli military, which included excavating a cemetery in northern Gaza, where intelligence suggested his body was buried. Now, what is the status of this ceasefire? Now, the recovery clears the way for the phase 2 of the US brokered ceasefire agreement to begin with. The ceasefire, which began in October 2025, has been rather fragile, with sporadic clashes but no large-scale combat. Now, the key elements of phase 2, which is of the peace plan, are, like you mentioned, reopening of the Rafah crossing. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that Israel will open the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt. And the second is the technocratic Palestinian government, where under the ceasefire, a technocratic Palestinian government will be formed to manage Gaza's public service and infrastructure. These are humanitarian assistance going into rebuilding of the Gaza Strip. Now, phase 2 is focused on rebuilding Gaza, which has been heavily damaged during the war. The ISF, which is the International Stabilization Force, will be involved in the security and reconstruction efforts. Now, phase 1, we saw hostage and prisoner exchange, where Israel received 20 living hostages and 27 bodies of deceased hostages. Israel also released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners in exchange. Now, for the Israeli hostages remains, for every Israeli hostages remains that were returned, Israel released 15 deceased Palestinian bodies. This does not come just as it is. It comes with a huge humanitarian crisis. The amount of casualties and displacement numbers are in thousands, where the conflict has caused significant destruction, where over 71,000 Palestinians have died and millions have been displaced. Now, the political and diplomatic impact of this instance is rather noteworthy, which follows after Netanyahu's announcement, where Netanyahu hailed the recovery of Gvili's remains as a great achievement, in his words, as I quote, and reiterated Israel's commitment to bringing all hostages home. He emphasized that this step allowed the peace process to move forward, particularly by demilitarizing of Gaza. Now, the reactions that have come with this return have also been momentous, where Gavili, the last hostage whose remains were returned, his family had previously demanded the Rafah crossing remains closed until their son's body was returned. They are now pressing for further action on the peace plan. The conflict toll has also been huge, where the attack by Hamas killed around 12,000 people in Israel and resulted in the capture of 251 hostages, according to reports. The latest recovery of Gavili's body marks the end of the hostage situation, with all hostages now returned, that is, living and deceased. This has also seen a lot of international involvement. The US's involvement, which was led by President Trump and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who are the special envoys to the Middle East for the US. So yes, Kriti, this is what we know as of now. This is the end of the first phase. This now, the remains that were returned now are a leeway into the implementation and execution of the second phase of the Gaza peace plan, which was brokered by US President Donald Trump. And yes, we finally see a development and a little bit of a progress into reconstruction of Gaza.
Right,
and
Marisha,
peace.
thanks very much for joining me and for helping us with those latest details coming in. And with that, viewers, we're now going to move on. Let's now cover news from the US, particularly from the state of Minnesota, where after Rennie Nicole Good, Alex Preddy was also shot by ICE agents fatally. And post the shootings of these two, Donald Trump is now going to send who he is calling border czar to Minnesota, as calls grow for full inquiry into the shootings of Alex Preddy. The US president says his administration is reviewing everything after the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy, as one Republican governor has already said enough is enough. In fact, let's bring you more details as far as the border czar that Trump is talking about is concerned. Trump is going to send in the aftermath of the shooting of Alex Preddy, a strong man there in Minnesota, and Trump is in fact sending Tom Homan to Minnesota. This amidst the growing protests after the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy. In fact, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has publicly backed Homan and also said that he will remove violent criminal illegal aliens from Minnesota's streets. Meanwhile, the White House press secretary has said the president has full trust and confidence in Noem, Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary. And in fact, to remind viewers, over the last 24 hours, Trump has shifted his messaging, even as he tries to come to grips with a public mood that is rapidly souring on his immigration policy. Alex Preddy was a 37-year-old US citizen, and he was shot dead on Saturday during an altercation with the Border Patrol, and this is the second Minneapolis killing by federal agents this month. US President has told that his administration is reviewing everything, but adds it doesn't play good when someone goes to a protest with a loaded gun. Several videos are being reviewed as of now, but Preddy is the second such recent fatal shooting by ICE agents in Minneapolis. And amidst this and after all of this, Trump administration is sending border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota, even as protests grow. In fact, earlier in the day, some statements have come in. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has spoken. There are also statements of Border Patrol commandants and of the protesters. Let's show you one by one.
Well, my question is, what's the plan, Donald Trump? What is the plan? What do we need to do to get these federal agents out of our state? You thought fear, violence, and chaos is what you wanted from us, and you clearly underestimated the people of this state and nation. We are tired, but we're resolved. We're peaceful, but we'll never forget. We're angry, but we won't give up hope. And above all else, we are clearly unified. We believe in law and order in this state. We believe in peace. And we believe that Donald Trump needs to pull these 3,000 untrained agents out of Minnesota before they kill another person. And we're up here telling another story of a Minnesotan just trying to live their life without the interference.
Many videos out there, many different accounts that you may see, that I may see, that anybody here may see. That, folks, is why we have something called an investigation, to take what you're talking about, to take those videos, to take witness statements, to take officer statements, all those minute details that will paint a true picture, not a freeze frame concept, and paint a larger picture of what really happened. That is why we investigate, so we can get to the truth, so there's not speculation. Speculation after 24 hours, you've got a lot of speculation in there. That officer, let's think of what those agents were doing on that scene, making a split-second decision. You've had 24 hours to try and armchair quarterback things. That agent had a split second to make a decision. 2 suspects have been shot, and suspects that assault, delay, obstruct, or threaten a law enforcement officer's life. It goes back to the choices that we just talked about. When individuals make poor choices, poor decisions, come into a law enforcement situation, an active law enforcement situation, conspire to come into that situation. Whether that's based on ideology, we don't know. That'll be in the investigation that we just talked about. That's what we base the split-second decisions on.
Well, I live in northern Minnesota, and we started having ICE people come up there, and they're coming into our restaurants, and they're going to people's homes, and they're taking people. We can't live like this. This is America. We're supposed to be free, and they're trying to take that away. In the 60s, I protested against the Vietnam War, and it helped. And I just thought, well, maybe I can do some good this time too.
I don't believe that anyone is not allowed to be here, and I think the way that the government is bringing ICE in to take away our neighbors and to pull families apart is completely inhumane. And if we don't speak out for them, then other people won't. So we're here to strike for our community. I think it was completely senseless. It was murder. He was not threatening. He was not attacking ICE. And I think the government is lying about what they're doing to cover up how what they're doing is illegal. And I think Alex does not deserve that. Neither did Renee, neither did any of the people that have been murdered.
All right, I now invite my colleague Marsha to join us back in the discussion here. Marsha, to talk to us about who this Tom Homan is that Trump is calling the border czar and intends to send to Minnesota after public outcry against ICE agents.
Yes, well, Kriti, a lot of unrest and aggression is being witnessed in the US, and focus being on Minneapolis and Minnesota at the moment. Now, the latest development with regards to why this unrest and why this aggression is just being aggravated is the shooting of a 37-year-old man, namely Alex Jeffrey Pretty. Now, he was fatally shot by a federal border patrol officer in Minneapolis on the 24th of January of this year. Now, Pretty, who was an ICU nurse and a citizen of US, was shot. Although he was unharmed, he was in fact holding a phone and not a gun during the confrontation. Now, to counter this, the federal agents initially claimed that Pretty had a weapon and was resisting an arrest, but the video footage contradicts this claim, showing that he was holding a phone. Now, seeing the optics of it has caused protesters not only in the US, not only in Minnesota, but all over US to protest and stand against the whole deployment of federal agents in Minnesota. Now, getting back to the claims of the federal office is that the US President Donald Trump and federal officials portrayed Pretty as a threat, claiming that he intended to attack federal agent and labeled him as a domestic terrorist. These are statements given by the government. Now, the department, like you mentioned, the Department of Homeland Security claimed that the agent acted in self-defense, asserting Pretty had a handgun and resisted their attempt to disarm him. But this is being contradicted by the evidence that was later found, where video evidence analyzed that by the New York Times and other reports showed that Pretty was holding a phone and not a gun during the encounter. Now, let me circle back to the protests and the civil unrest. The shooting has led to a widespread of protests in Minneapolis. Demonstrators have clashed with federal agents demanding accountability and calling for withdrawal of federal forces from the city. At least 1,000 people attended the vigil that was held for Pretty. Even in this winter, in this harsh winter that US is facing. Now, the response of it has been rather noteworthy, where protests have continued across. But the background of this is that the US government has increased its immigration enforcement efforts by deploying thousands of federal agents to the city under the Trump's administration, Operation Metro Surge, to target illegal immigrants. The operation has sparked protests, especially after yet another deadly shooting of a US citizen, Renee Good, by the ICE agent back on 7th of January of this year. There is a political and legal fallout, like you mentioned. Minnesota's Attorney General has filed a lawsuit against the federal government to prevent the destruction of evidence related to the shooting. Now, nationally, the debate is ongoing over the balance between immigration enforcement and civil rights, where many are criticizing the tactics of the federal agents. Now, tensions have deepened. So yes, Priti, this is what we know about the unrest and aggravated aggression within Minneapolis, Minnesota, and with more of these unrests, there's a grim reality that's being portrayed out of the US.
Marisha, thanks very much then for filling us in with all the latest. And with that, viewers, before we wrap up the bulletin, let's also bring you the latest on the Russia-Ukraine peace dialogue. You know that trilateral talks between US, Russia and Ukraine are being held in Abu Dhabi. And as far as the latest developments go, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that US has assured 100% security guarantees to the war-torn nation. But in the latest, we're also picking up that Russian strikes continue, and the strikes have left at least 1,330 buildings without heat. Russia has launched a vast attack on Ukraine's energy system, rocking Kyiv with explosions and leaving 1.2 million properties without power nationwide during sub-zero winter temperatures. But Kyiv is assured 100% security guarantees in a documented manner from the United States, and that's the statement that has come out from Zelensky himself. Kyiv is waiting for a time and place for the document, however, to be signed. European Union countries have also given final approval to ban Russian gas in another major update. Meanwhile, there is a statement that's coming in. Let's hear that.
Для нас гарантії безпеки, передусім, це двосторонні гарантії безпеки з Сполученими Штатами Америки. Документ готовий на 100%. Ми очікуємо від партнерів готовності дати і місця, коли ми його підпишемо. А потім документ буде йти в ратифікацію в Конгрес Сполучених Штатів Америки і в український парламент, згідно наших домовленостей. Другі гарантії безпеки для України – це європейські гарантії безпеки, це коаліція охочих і найголовніше – членство в європейській.
Es ist gut und wichtig, dass Präsident Trump es sich zum Ziel gemacht hat, das Sterben in der Ukraine zu beenden. Das Treffen in Alaska hat verdeutlicht, für einen gerechten und dauerhaften Frieden muss Moskau sich endlich bewegen. Bis das nicht passiert, muss der Druck auf Russland erhöht werden, auch mit verstärkten Ukraine-Hilfen. Dass auch Japan die Ukraine bislang mit 12 Milliarden Dollar unterstützt hat und Sanktionen gegen Russland durchsetzt, dafür bin ich sehr dankbar.
Das erste Gipfeltreffen war eine sehr direkte Reaktion auf Russlands schrecklichen Angriffskrieg auf die Ukraine und die daraus entstandene Energiekrise. Der Gipfel hat damals ein wichtiges Signal gesendet. Wir als Nordseeländer stärken unsere Zusammenarbeit, um die Nordsee zu einem Kraftwerk in Europa zu machen. Und damit steht der Gipfel für unsere Unabhängigkeit, die wir gemeinsam stärken wollen.
All right, viewers, that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching the newsroom on the NewsX World.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Protesters gather in Minneapolis to demand federal immigration agents leave after a 37-year-old man is fatally shot by Border Patrol. Governor Tim Walz calls on President Trump to withdraw the agents as demonstrations and political tension grow over the incident. Donald Trump urges Minnesota's governor and Minneapolis mayor to hand over criminal illegal aliens for deportation. State and federal officials offer conflicting accounts of events leading up to the deadly shooting. China's President Xi Jinping calls India a good neighbour, friend and partner in a Republic Day message. Xi says bilateral ties are improving and important for global peace and prosperity. At least 104 political prisoners are released from jails across Venezuela, rights groups have said. Fora Penal says the release process is continuing and more freedoms are expected. A massive storm leaves over 1 million households without power and forces more than 10,000 flight cancellations across the US. Officials warn of life-threatening conditions from Texas to New England as at least 3 storm-related deaths are reported. President Zelensky says a US security guarantees document for Ukraine is 100% ready after talks with Washington and Moscow. Kyiv now awaits a signing date as Zelensky renews his push for EU membership by 2027. Meanwhile, over 1,300 apartment buildings in Kyiv remain without heating after Russian missile and drone attacks. Ukraine says a wave of strikes hits the energy grid, cutting power to 1.2 million properties nationwide. Israel says it will allow a limited reopening of Gaza's Rafah crossing with Egypt. The announcement comes as Palestinians report at least 3 killed in Israeli attacks across Gaza. We start in the Indo-Pacific this hour, and China's foreign ministry has stated that its recent trade arrangements with Canada are not targeted at any third party, responding to US President Donald Trump's threat to impose a 100% tariff on Canadian exports. The trade pact, which was signed on January the 16th, reveals a preliminary deal where Canada will allow 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into its market at a reduced tariff rate of 6.1%, down from a previously imposed 100% surtax. And in exchange, China will cut duties on Canadian agricultural exports, specifically lowering canola seed oil tariffs to 15%, down from 85%. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Guo Jiakun has urged countries to handle relations with a win-win rather than zero-sum mindset, and noted that China and Canada are simply addressing bilateral economic frictions. Let's listen in.
中国主张各国应以共赢而非零和的理念，以合作而非对抗的方式处理国与国的关系。中加构建新型战略伙伴关系，就妥善解决中加之间的经贸问题做出一些具体安排，体现了平等相待、开放包容、和平合作、共享共赢的精神，不针对任何第三方，符合两国人民共同利益，也有利于世界和平稳定与发展繁荣。
We're now joined by Andrew K.P. Leung. He is a China strategist and he joins us live from Hong Kong. What do you think of the statements here? Of course, Canada and China, the United States' top trading allies, other than Mexico, of course, making a deal without Washington. How do you think Donald Trump has read this?
Well, Donald Trump has already said that if Canada should have a almost a free trade agreement with China, he's going to impose 100% or even more higher tariffs on Canada. And Prime Minister Carney has responded by saying that the current deal with China is only limited to the specific products of electric vehicles from China, lowering the tariffs because these vehicles are highly competitive and highly very good value for money. And then, of course, on China's side, importing agricultural products, canola seed oil from Canada. So it's not by no means a kind of comprehensive free trade agreement because China is, after all, regarded by Canada and various Western nations as a non-market economy, and also taking into account the United States, Canada, and Mexico have their own internal agreements, and a completely free trade agreement with a perceived non-market economy could have impact on this relationship between Canada, United States, and Mexico, and hence this calibrated response.
And Andrew, of course, this follows Carney's well-received speech at Davos, with no mention of the United States directly, but it was pretty clear what Carney was getting at. He said, when rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself, on why countries are thinking about this strategic autonomy when it comes to trade. Do you think Washington now feels threatened by this new warming of Beijing-Ottawa ties?
Well, as I said, I mean, as far as the Trump administration is concerned, what Trump doesn't want, of course, is China's footprint in the Western Hemisphere. And of course, Canada is a very, very large part of the Western Hemisphere. And hence this blowback to Canada, threatening to impose 100% tariffs. But then the Prime Minister Carney's explanation, I think, has taken care of Trump's concerns, and it should at least calm down some of the rhetoric. But of course, that the United States under Donald Trump's 2.0 is completely throwing the rule-based order out of the window and also threatening allies, including its next door large neighbor and very close ally, the Canada, and also even NATO members imposing tariffs and wanting to take over, annex Greenland, for example, belonging to Finland. So all these unilateralism and indeed imperialism is destroying a lot of trust of the Western allies' reliance on the United States, and hence everybody is scrambling to recalibrate the relationship with China. After all, China is the second largest economy, opens lots of opportunities. It's not to embrace China entirely because there are, of course, serious concerns on ideological and other fronts. But obviously, they don't want to tie their fortune to this so-called transatlantic relationship, which has proven to be highly unreliable, if not dangerous.
And Canada allowing 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles at a sharply reduced tariff. Is this a test case for China to crack North America's protectionist wall?
The numbers are carefully studied so as not to flood the Canadian market entirely. And of course, it's just to test the waters, because the last thing that Canada want is for China's very competitive electric vehicles, not only in price, but in quality and technology and innovation, destroying Canada's car making industries entirely. So it's just a test of the market. But on the other hand, on the other side, on China's side, I think China's now learning how to deal with the concerns of the host countries. Indeed, even though China's electric vehicles are highly competitive, very good value for money, the last thing that China would like is just to destroy key industries in all the host countries that would worsen the kind of negative view of China. So I think that the China is beginning to outsource some of the production, the vehicle production in the host countries, so as to create jobs in the host countries and bringing economic benefits, creating a more win-win kind of partnership.
Okay, do stay with us, Andrew, as we move on to our next story. And an earthquake of magnitude 5.5 has struck near the rural county of Tiwo in Gansu province in western China, which raised its magnitude from 5.2. According to reports, the earthquake was at a depth of 10 kilometers. Gansu is an earthquake-prone region located on the northern edge of the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. Earlier in 2023, a magnitude of 6.2 earthquake struck the Gansu province and the neighbouring province of Qinghai. It was one of the most severe earthquakes since 2014, which had claimed the lives of 150 people. We turn over to a new story now, and the US Under Secretary of Defense Elbridge Colby and South Korean Defense Minister Yan Gyu-bak agreed on January the 26th to deepen cooperation on South Korea's pursuit of a nuclear-powered submarine. The move is part of South Korea's growing responsibility in regional defense, particularly in deterring North Korea. Colby's visit to Seoul is his first overseas trip in the role, with Washington signaling that South Korea should take a more leading role in peninsular defense. The Pentagon's new national defense strategy suggests a more limited US role, with South Korea assuming primary responsibility for countering North Korea's threats. This agreement underscores the strengthening of the US-South Korea alliance. Andrew K.P. Leung joins us again to discuss this. Would a South Korean nuclear-powered submarine militarily change the deterrence equation with North Korea in the peninsula?
Well, The nuclear submarine deal between South Korea and the United States must be seen in the context of the geopolitics in the region. It's not just between South Korea, North Korea, and the United States. It's the whole Asia Pacific, particularly targeting at the rise of China and China's growing influence and military capabilities in the region, not only just on Taiwan, but also in the South China Sea and other neighboring countries, territorial claims, but also Americans' dominance in the region. And part of this dynamics is the deterrence of the U.S. Navy, particularly in terms of nuclear capable submarines and nuclear power, and also nuclear armed submarines. But unfortunately, submarines need to be built, and the American shipbuilding capacity has been almost evacuated over the decades. Now, throughout the world, in terms of shipbuilding capacity, out of every 1,000 ships built, the United States only accounts for less than 10.